Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if Naruto becomes greatest ninja in world with help of Kyuubi and some others. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. What was the man thinking? The boy had just been born. No name or family to speak of, no one was even sure where the child had come from. And no one who knew what he contained would have anything to do with him. The white-haired balding man sitting behind the desk looked at the child asleep in the basket in front of him, the seal still visible on his belly. There had already been an attempt on his life, a nurse whose care he had been put in for a moment, after the news that the Yondiami had been found dead, with the child in his arms, in the middle of the battlefield littered with the bodies of the other leaf nin. Traces of the Kyuubi's energy were still swirling around the child, so it was easy to guess what had happened. He could force a family to take him, but resentment for the only survivor of the great tragedy was already spreading through the ranks and city. He wished he could keep the child with him, but he was already in a precarious position. He had retaken the position of Hokage because there was no one else at the time, and it was necessary that they keep a strong face even after the great loss. He already had too much to deal with, and this child sleeping in front of him, sucking on his thumb, was the greatest of all. An adoption home was the only choice that the Hokage could think of. He had already ordered a list of them from his secretary. In the morning, he would find one, and make it law that the boy be treated as any other. Anyone who stepped against the child would have to face the most powerful nin in the city. He looked at the whisker marks on his cheeks, wondering if they would disappear or grow with time, knowing that they would be a reminder to any who looked on him as to who he was. As he brushed a finger over the baby's cheek, and the boy opened his eyes for a moment. Their eyes locked, his aged gray-green eyes and the youthful brilliant blue. He presented the last thing he could ever give this child, because the law applied to him as well. Uzumaki Naruto, they will never know how great a hero you actually are. You have quite a future ahead of you, don't disappoint me. He looked over at the other pictures of the previous Hokage. Or him, as he looked at the most recent. Then he looked back at the baby and found that he had already gone back to sleep. But the next few years were not filled with light and hope as the Hokage had desperately hoped for. More attempts were made on the boy's life until he had to assign 2 Anbu to guard over him in secret for anyone who would threaten his life. But the Anbu could only do so much, and they would watch on, as people slapped the boy out of their way, kicked him, verbally attacked him, there were stones and other things. The orphanage wasn't much better. He was always placed at the end of the line for food and was given the scrapings that were left. When he was picked on by the other children for his whisker marks, the adults did nothing to step in. But if he tried to fight back against them, he was punished until he didn't fight back at all, just taking the blows and bruises that healed by morning, something he couldn't explain. The children, seeing the way he was treated by the adults, did everything they could to make the boy's life miserable. He was allowed no personal belongings, and anything he tried to keep was taken from him. He was dressed in old clothes that had been donated to the orphanage. He was forced to wear a set of bright orange clothes that no one had wanted, but he didn't care. In short, the boy was broken. He took refuge in libraries, though he was never allowed to take the books out. He would find a corner and a book and start reading, for hours and hours. It was the only time the boy ever smiled. When he took on the life of a knight or Major Roroni, but then when he had to put the book down, he remembered his life, and every time he found his heart broke a little more. No one looked out for him, only himself, but he felt something inside him, something trying to break out. It was angry and strong. But it wasn't angry at him, it was angry at everyone else, at the ones who did this to him, the ones who broke his spirit so long ago. One night, when he was 10, Naruto was walking back from a bookstore. He had finally gathered up enough money to get something he had always wanted, a book of his own. It wasn't very big, just a small fantasy about a ninja that never gave up, and never went back on his word, protecting the people of his village with everything he had because they were his precious people. He wanted to be like the man. He wanted to be strong and for people to at least smile at him once. It was then that he walked into a man and fell down, the book falling out of his hands. He was grabbed roughly and lifted into the air. "Watch where you're going, runt." The man was drunk, and took a moment to recognize the child he was holding up. The fox brat. The man smiled wickedly and punched the boy in the stomach. He was going to enjoy this. Naruto, on the other hand, just wanted to be left alone as he was dropped and crumpled to the ground, holding his belly, tears forming in his eyes. He looked over and saw the book on the ground. He reaches over with a trembling hand to get the book, Keep it safe, that was all he wanted. But the man didn't let him. He stepped on the boy's wrist, increasing the pressure until Naruto was whimpering in pain, but he refused to cry out. He knew that only meant more pain, but the man didn't stop there. He reaches down and picked up the book. What is this? Did you steal this? The man didn't care, so long as it gave him another reason to punish the boy. He looked in the title and was furious. What Naruto had thought was a fantasy book was not, it was The Young Life of the Yondaime. In his fury, the man stopped down on the wrist and smiled at the satisfying snapping of bone and whimpering. I might have gone easier on you, but not now, you killed this man. Naruto didn't understand, he just wanted to be left alone. He wanted to go back to the orphanage that hated him, and read the book by the moonlight. He was in so much pain, his wrist was broken, he was sure of it. He knew it would heal, but it didn't stop it from hurting so much. It wasn't the first time. He had been pushed down the stairs a few months ago and had ended up with a broken leg. It took 2 days to heal, but it did. The man was talking and kicking him in the stomach, but Naruto was fading out. He felt like he is falling. His eyes glazed over when he realized that no one was going to save him. Pitiful, to think that I'm trapped within such a weak body. Naruto heard the words, but he didn't understand. He opened his eyes and found himself standing in front of a large cage. He looked around confused. In here, boy, came the voice, from the other side of the bars. A light shone and Naruto stepped back in shock. It was huge, larger than anything alive Naruto had ever seen before. The massive fox lay there, surrounded by his 9 tails, its head by the cage watching the boy with its red eyes. Am I dead? It was the only thing that he could think to explain this. He was standing shin deep in dirty water, dripping from rusted pipes that came out from the walls. The air was humid and the smell was bad and only just tolerable. No, and I plan to make sure that you don't end up that way. The voice was powerful and Naruto felt it shake him to his very core. I am the Kyuubi, sealed within your body because of the 4th Hokage's actions 10 years ago. Pictures flashed around Naruto showing him fragments of the Great Fox's memories, including one of a man riding a great toad into battle surrounded by ninja, all wearing the head protector of leaf. We will talk later, but for now you have a book to recover. There was a little amusement in the voice as red chakras slipped under the bars of the cage and swelled up around Naruto. Naruto felt a sharp pain in his belly as he opened his eyes and was kicked back into an ally wall. He was bruised and beaten, his leg felt like it might be fractured, and he had several broken ribs. The man was still angry, but he was a little worn out from just beating this kid around, but he wasn't going to stop anytime soon. Naruto coughed and spit up some blood. He started to struggle to his feet. So, you still want more, huh? Stupid brat. The man rushed at Naruto, who was leaning against the wall, his right wrist still broken, in quite a lot of pain, but as the man approached Naruto felt something inside of him, power. As the man's fist came towards him, Naruto reaches up and caught it. He had done it in reaction, his small fingers grabbing the man's fist and not letting go. The man pulled back in an attempt to pull his hand from the boy's grip but found his fist and the boy quite immovable. Naruto was surprised. The red energy was flowing through him, his ribs, leg, and wrist healed very quickly and he felt the new power and strength that he had inside him. He knew what he had to do, he had to get his book back. He squeezed and pulled, the man's fingers broke under the pressure and he cried out in pain. But as he was pulled forward he saw a red glow coming from the boy's other hand and his eyes grew wide in shock. Naruto's arm shot out when the man was in range and his fist slammed into the middle of the man's chest as he let go of his other hand. The man was thrown back against the opposite wall of the alleyway. He coughed and tasted blood in his mouth, but he was in pain. Several of his ribs had cracked under the blow and he was having a very hard time breathing. Then he looked up and saw the small demon child walking towards him. He shook with fear at the look in his eyes. Naruto looked at the man in front of him. His senses had suddenly and greatly improved. He could see the look in the man's eyes, and he could smell it in his sweat, fear. As he stepped forward towards the man he realized that it was not just hate that had been projected at him by the people of the village, it was also fear. Don't hurt me. The man stuttered out, cradling his broken hand. He had never been so afraid in his life before now. Feeling the power that the small boy generated, nothing should have that much power, it shouldn't be allowed to exist. Please, don't hurt me. Naruto looked at the man, standing right in front of him. He leaned down and took the book that had fallen from his hand. He stood and looked up at the building, having sensed something watching them. But in truth he didn't care. He took his book and headed back to the orphanage, knowing that somehow, his life had just changed a great deal. One of the two Anbu who had been watching Naruto raced over the buildings towards the offices of the Hokage. He had to be told, the boy had used the Kyuubi's power, something that shouldn't be possible. Things started to change immediately. After Naruto got back to the orphanage, he ran up to his room and sat down with his book in his favorite reading corner. Unfortunately, it wasn't long before some of the older bullies that picked on Naruto saw him with the book and decided to go have some fun. Kyuubi, the largest of the bullies, stood in front of Naruto, who was totally absorbed in the book and apparently hadn't noticed any of them. "Oi, shrimp, give me the book." He held out one beefy hand demanding the book, but he didn't get it. In fact, Naruto didn't even move, except to turn the page, his eyes intently on the page. Kyuubi was mad. No one ignored him, and he reached and snatched the book from Naruto. Naruto watched helplessly and Kyuubi took his book and tossed it to another of the bullies, who looked at it and threw it to another. "My book, give me back my book," Naruto said in a small voice. He just wanted to sit and read. Why had they come and bothered him? "Oh look, it talks," said Tsutomu, another of the bullies, holding the book up in front of Naruto, just out of his reach. They were surprised by how fast Naruto's hand snaked out to grab the book, but it was still out of his grasp and he couldn't get it. "Jump, shrimp, if you want the book." Tsutomu held the book as high as he could over Naruto's head, well out of his usual jumping range, but Naruto wasn't usual today. He jumped clear over the boy's head, grabbing the book as he went past. Landing on the other side, he ran up to his bed, wondering to himself what just happened. Naruto took out the book and looked at it. He then started to read again, forgetting about the bullies and instead reading about the Yondaime, who was now becoming his hero. When Naruto fell asleep some hours later, he found himself back in front of the cage once again. He stood and bowed to the Kyuubi. "Thank you, because of you I'm alive, I didn't think I was going to be." He was surprised when he heard the chuckle from the great fox. "Don't thank me yet. That man was just a drunk, a nobody, he wasn't even a shinobi. But you've now awakened to the power inside you, and things will change. And I will not have a weakling as my container, so you're going to learn, and get stronger." The tone of voice said that he was very serious, and at the same time, a little amused. "Thank you Kyuubi-sensei, but how will you teach me?" He wasn't afraid of the great beast at all, but he admired him, his strength, his power, his confidence. "Don't mock me, boy. I will teach you with my memories and instruct you on how to control your chakra. I will also give you skills that I had at the height of my power. You will become the greatest shinobi in the world." There was no doubt in Kyuubi's voice that he could do what he said. Even as good as the Yondaime? His eyes were wide and hopeful. He had never had anything to look forward to before, and now he was told he was going to become a shinobi. Hope lit a fire in his heart. For the first time in a long time he smiled and nearly broke down in tears. He was so happy. Better than the Yondaime, he learned from humans and had human power. You're learning from me and you've got my power. It will take a long time, your body can't even handle a fraction of my power, but in time you will be able to hold and control it. He smirked, he was going to enjoy this. Naruto was going to become great, and when all was ready he would let loose Naruto to get the revenge that he had not been able to get due to his blind rage at the time, but he would get it when Naruto was ready. "When do I start?" asked an excited Naruto. "Now, you're too young for a technique yet, so we'll just work on gathering your chakra in your body and focusing it into your hands." And so it started. Naruto's sleeping form smiled as he learned. The next day brought even more changes. Naruto walked down to breakfast to find that everyone was keeping away from him. Apparently rumors were spreading about him. It hurt him to see that the people were afraid of him. But he brushed it off. Now he has a friend and a sensei, someone cared about him, and that's all that mattered to him. But one last piece of advice that Kyuubi had given him was that he should never ever tell what he was doing, and that he should never give away the skills that he has learned unless necessary. The best trick is the one they don't expect. And Naruto was forced to agree. Naruto was surprised when he was called to the office of the head of the orphanage. He walked into the office a bit hesitantly. Nothing good had ever come from that office. He opened the door and peeked around the bend. Mr. Chikyu, the head of the orphanage, was behind his desk, a folder on his desk. Uzumaki Naruto, since the beginning, You have been nothing but trouble since you got here, and now, thankfully, I can get rid of you." He moved the file over and pushed it off the desk and right into the trash can. "It seems that someone is willing to put you up in an apartment. I have no idea who it is, and I say they are wrong in their judgment. I would toss you out on the street, but it seems I can't get everything. But there will be someone to show you a way today at noon. You are dismissed." Now Naruto knew that he had never caused trouble, but he was always blamed for whatever wrong that seemed to happen around him. But now he was being kicked out from the only place he could call home. But he had never been accepted, he had been the outcast. Now he was going to have his own place, but he was still unsure. He just stood there in front of the desk. Chikyu looked up at him angrily. "Get out of my office, boy, you're not my problem anymore." And that was it, Naruto was out. He walked out and sat on one of the benches outside the orphanage. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the book. He opened it and started reading. As the hours passed, no one bothered the boy, absorbed in his book as he was. If he had looked, he would have seen that no one came within several feet of him. At one point a mother had snatched up a child who had started to ask him what he was reading and hurried her away, her pale lavender eyes watching the boy over her mother's shoulder as she was rushed away. But Naruto noticed nothing of this. Around noon a voice interrupted him. He looked up to see a woman with the head protector symbolizing she is a shinobi of Leaf. I asked, "Are you Uzumaki Naruto?" He nodded as he put the book inside his jacket. "I've been hired to escort you to an apartment and present you with this key." She held out a key for him. He hesitated for a moment before reaching out and taking the key from her. "Alright, let's get this over with, I've got things to do." Then she muttered, like staying away from demon freaks. He started walking away through the crowd. He got up and followed her, depressed by her words but following just the same, almost having to run to keep up with her brisk pace. They got to the apartment building and the female nin pointed to it. "There you go, kid, second floor, I'm leaving now." And without a second glance back she walked away. Naruto looked at the building and after reaching with one hand to feel the reassuring weight of the book inside his jacket, he walked up inside into the second floor. He looked around for some sort of indication that one of the rooms was supposed to be his. He found it, a door with an envelope attached to it, his name on the envelope. He pulled down the envelope, waiting till he was inside to open it. The inside of the apartment wasn't that bad, the furniture was all second-hand, but not bad condition. He looked around carefully, just in case it was an ambush, but there was no one at all. He sat down on the couch that was against one wall and opened the envelope. "Dear Naruto, I am sorry that I cannot be there to congratulate you on awakening your shinobi abilities, but I have other duties that I must attend to. Let this apartment be a congratulatory gift. You do not have to worry about the rent that has already been taken care of. As for money for food and other expenses, you will receive a letter once a week with enough money for your needs. The kitchen has already been stocked with food and you will find some money in your dresser drawer to start you out. Get some clothes of your own. In 2 weeks a new semester at the Ninja Academy starts and you have already been enrolled. It is my wish that you go there and learn, become the greatest person you can become. Don't let me down, your friend." Naruto sat there and cried. Now there were two people who believed in him. Granted, one was a demon that no one could know about, and the other was a person that Naruto didn't know, but still, he held the proof of this person in his hands and looked around him at the apartment, and he smiled. His life was for the first time changing for the better. He got up and walked into his own room for the first time and opened the drawer of the dresser, and there was the money, a nice-sized roll of bills. Naruto cheered and grabbing the money he ran out, not forgetting to lock the door before running down. He looked back at the building and at his location before running away down towards the shopping district. Naruto had never gone shopping for his own clothes before, so he had no idea where to start. He walked into one store and started looking around for something that looked good before the shop owner saw him and ordered him out of the store for scaring away his customers. This happened several more times, once for just looking in the window. Naruto was getting really depressed. Why did the people treat him this way? What had he ever done to them? He found a bench outside a building that had brown paper blocking the windows, and sat down in it, looking down at his feet, feeling really bad. "What's wrong, kid? Get lost? Can't find your parents?" A man had just walked out of the building that the bench was in front of. He was holding a sign in his hands that looked brand new. The sign said, "Wonderland Clothing, new styles for a new you." The man looked at Naruto. "How about this? You help me hang up this sign and I'll see if I can help you out, alright?" Naruto just nodded dumbly and saw that there was a beam of wood with a set of hooks spaced just right for the loops of the sign so it could hang on it. He helped the man by going up on the beam, by way of a ladder, and putting the loops on the hooks while the man held the sign up. "Thanks a lot, kid. Now my store can open up tomorrow and I can start business." The man dusted his hands off and held one out to Naruto. "I'm Kibo. But anyway, how can I help you out? I was shopping for clothes, but they just keep kicking me out of the stores." Naruto looked down at the ground. "Kicking you out, huh? Well, how about this?" He opened the door and ushered the boy inside. "I won't kick you out, and because you helped me out and you're my first customer, I'll even give you a discount." He smiled as he turned the lights on, and revealed the store that Naruto couldn't see before because of the paper in the windows. There was clothing in all sorts of styles and sizes. "I used to travel a lot, went around to all the big nations and countries and everything, learned about the different styles of clothing at each. I just got back and I decided to set up shop. I used to live here and I know what people want, so I'll probably do a good amount of business." He turned to face the still awed Naruto. "So, tell me, what are you looking for?" Naruto looked down at himself, his old second-hand clothes, and the bright orange that no one had wanted. He remembered what the sign said, "New styles for a new you." He smiled as he looked at Kibo, who was patiently watching the boy. "A new me." At that, Kibo broke into a wide grin and laughed. "I was hoping you'd say that. Come on, let's have some fun." And they did. At first Naruto had been shy, but the shop owner would have nothing of it and insisted that Naruto smile at all times. For the next few hours they both laughed and joked while picking out clothes. Naruto felt that he didn't want this day to ever end. But unfortunately it had to, but not before he had the best day of his life. Naruto ended up picking out several sets of clothes, several normal everyday clothes, blue jeans, t-shirts, and the like, and several other clothes. What he was happiest about was his jacket. It was mostly light orange with darker patches on his shoulders and at the front pockets. On the back there was a dark red fox decal showing a fox's head rising out of a fire. The jacket was heavier than most due to some added features. In particular was the fact that it was triple layer, an outer waterproof layer, a middle layer of thin, finely woven steel mesh, and then an inner layer for comfort and flexibility. There were also secret pockets hidden on the sleeves and by the main zipper, as well as several on the inside. Naruto got the pants that went along with the jacket because they were made the same way. The triple layers and several hidden pockets. They weighed a lot more than normal clothes, but Kibo said that it would be good training and would help him build up his strength, and if he ever wanted it changed all he had to do was bring them back and he would repair or alter them. When they were finally done, Naruto paid for the clothes. Naruto was delighted to find that he still had about half the money that he had been given left over. As he was headed for the door with the bags, wearing the new jacket and pants, because Kibo had insisted that he throw out the old clothes, the man called to him. "Hey, you never told me your name." At this, Naruto looked down for a second before reaching up and feeling the presence of the book that he had placed in the inside pocket and remembered the line, "Never be ashamed of yourself." He shook himself a little. "It's Naruto, Uzumaki Naruto." He half expected the man to yell at him and insist that he give back all the clothes and tell him never to come back, but it didn't happen. "Naruto, huh? Well, it was a pleasure doing business with you, and I look forward to seeing you around." And he went back to cleaning up the shop from his busy day with the boy. "So, that's Naruto," he thought to himself. "He doesn't seem so bad. Interesting." Through. He watched the boy walk out of the store and out onto the nighttime street, a bag of clothes in each hand, and smiled. "I wonder if I'll see him again." And he swept up the store, expecting a busy day tomorrow, and it was indeed. The next 2 weeks were spent preparing for going to the Ninja Academy. Naruto trained his mind and chakra manipulation during the nights with Kyuubi, and at Kyuubi's insistence, training his body during the day, doing calisthenics during the day to build his strength. Naruto got an alarm clock and set it to wake him up early so he could do some running when no one would disturb him. After the first week of just running, Kyuubi changed it a little, insisting that Naruto learn to gather chakra while he was running. Naruto grumbled a lot about all the training he was doing when he hadn't even seen the academy yet. When Kyuubi heard that, he insisted that Naruto find the building so he could see what it looked like and how to get to it. Finally 2 weeks had passed and it was time for Naruto to go to the academy. But Kyuubi insisted that Naruto do his usual run, followed by a run to the academy gathering chakra all the way. This tired Naruto out quite a bit from the extra run. He usually meditated and Kyuubi would tell him the exercises he wanted Naruto to do, and that let him gain back some chakra and stamina so he could do them, but it seemed he would not have the luxury today. When Naruto got to the building he was quite out of breath and the clock showed that he was already a few minutes late. He asked at the front desk where his class was and after an irritated reply from the lady behind the desk he ran off down the hallway, skidding into the classroom where the teacher was taking roll call. "Who are you?" the teacher asked. He was wearing a slightly worn headband, a small ponytail high up on his head, and a scar across the middle of his face going over his nose and under his eyes. "You, Uzumaki Naruto, sir." The man frowned a little, as the students began to murmur. He looked down at his list, he marked something and turned back to Naruto. "You're 5 minutes late, a shinobi must always be on time and prepared. Go take a seat." And he continued with the roll call. "I am Umyu no Uruka, you will call me Uruka-sensei. You will raise your hand if you have a question or comment and wait till I have called on you before answering, am I understood?" He looked around the room at all the children nodding, seeing that Naruto had taken a seat back in the corner, his head down on the desk, watching, but obviously exhausted. Probably from the run to class, he figured. "I will teach you what it means to be a shinobi, a ninja of Leaf. I will teach you many things, including the history of Leaf, rules of being a ninja, weapons basics, chakra manipulation and more." And so it began. Uruka was a harsh teacher, always expecting more than he thought the students could give, especially Naruto, picking out the flaws in whatever Naruto was doing. Naruto, however, didn't let that stop him. He would often fall asleep in class when he was actually meditating and taking with Kyuubi. Kyuubi wanted Naruto to look like an untalented ninja, and so Naruto did what his sensei told him, acting like a no-talent ninja at school, while he trained even harder than before at home. At school he was called dead last, and picked on by the other students for falling asleep in class, getting yelled at by Uruka, and generally being a bad student. But Naruto knew it wasn't true. His strength was growing all the time and the jacket and pants weren't heavy to him anymore at all. He was learning the different hand seals necessary for using ninjutsu and genjutsu. He also learned that with concentration he could talk with Kyuubi whenever he wanted to, and it became easier over time to the point when he would have conversations with Kyuubi while running in the morning. All this time Naruto stayed the quiet boy he had been before, but now, there was a small smile that played on his lips and would annoy Uruka when he saw it in class because it meant that Naruto wasn't paying any attention at all. Naruto made no friends with the other students, and never really talked with them except when he had to. Naruto continued this for a month, and then two, never letting on how good he actually was. Some of the other students thought he was weird and decided to follow him one day, to figure out where he went, because no one knew anything about him, except that no one liked him. But he didn't go home, no one came to pick him up, instead he started to run, the other students having though he had spotted them, ran after him. But Naruto didn't pay any attention to them, he just kept running, until finally the students were too exhausted to follow him anymore. And they stopped, panting and breathing hard as they watched him run out of sight. Kiba was angry. How could the dead last run so fast or so long? Akamaru sniffed along the ground and tried to follow, but he wasn't so good at tracking yet, and the smell of chakra that all the Inuzuka dogs learned overloaded him and made him sneeze and rub his nose into the ground and then go over to Kiba and sit by the exhausted boy and tell him what he could. Ino grumbled. She thought the new kid was cute, though she would never admit it. She had asked her parents if they knew anything about the Uzumaki family, and they looked at each other and told her that she should just focus on her studies. They turned back and headed home, each wondering about this strange boy. Ino went to tell her friends Shikamaru and Choji that she couldn't find out anything about him, except that he could run damn fast. Naruto smiled when he noticed them stop running after him. In truth, he had been running faster than normal because Kyuubi had promised to teach him an actual technique today and not just learning about more control or building strength. "Calm down, boy, or you'll exhaust yourself before you can even learn what I'm going to teach you." But there was amusement in the Kyuubi's voice at how eager his container was to learn something new. "Go out into the forest, find a good-sized clearing." Naruto did as he was told. "Alright, Kyuubi-sensei, I found a clearing." He thought so Kyuubi could hear him. "Alright, you've learned the Bunshin no Jutsu, clone technique, in class, and I like the way you mess it up. No one would suspect that you've already perfected it." Well, I'm going to teach you the next level. This technique is called the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, shadow clone technique. And it will allow you to make real clones, not those flimsy illusions. This way you'll be able to have a sparking partner and improve your fighting abilities, which are quite frankly pathetic. Naruto hung his head at this but brightened up at the thought of getting better. And so, for the next few hours Naruto practiced, first just the order of the hand seals, and then seeing how the molding of chakra was different from the usual Bunshin no Jutsu, until finally Kyuubi said he was ready to try it for real. Naruto did and ended up with 3 clones that looked like him, but he hadn't molded the chakra quite right and a few seconds later they disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto kept trying until the sun was about to set, and then he got it right, and there were no less than 5 of him running around congratulating each other on getting it right. Kyuubi smiled inwardly happy at his student's progress, and sent him home for a good night's rest. There would be no lessons tonight and Naruto would be allowed to sleep fully. Naruto went home exhausted by his training and weighed down by his clothing, a happy smile plastered on his face. Alright kid, a few rules first about any of the techniques that I teach you. 1. You don't use them unless you have to. 2. Don't tell anyone where you learned them from should you be forced to show them. 3. Never teach them to anyone outside of your own family. Now before you go back to your place and sleep, go to that Kibo guy, the one you got this suit from. It's time for you to increase the weight. And so he did. Naruto went back to Wonderland Clothing and stepped inside. There was a woman behind the counter this time and Kibo was nowhere in sight. Naruto walked up to the counter. He had lost most of his shyness dealing with the brash demon teacher, but he was still a little hesitant to talk with the unknown lady. "Hello, can I help you?" said the woman when she saw Naruto walk up to her. "I'm looking for Kibo, is he in? My husband?" This startled Naruto a little and he looked and saw the ring on her finger. "He is, but he's a little busy right now, working on something for a customer. Would you like me to take him a message?" Yay, could you tell him that his first customer is back?" The woman looked confused, then thoughtful before breaking into a big smile, something that Naruto had never seen directed at him in a good manner. "Oh, you must be Naruto. Kibo keeps wondering if you'll show up again. I'm sure you'll be happy to see you. I'm Kido. You wait right here." And with that she walked through a door at the back into what Naruto guessed was a workroom. Kibo came out a few moments later while Naruto was examining some shuriken holders that were being displayed in a glass case. "Ah, Naruto, my wife said that it was you. What can I do for you?" "No problems, I hope." Worry creased his forehead for a moment before Naruto shook his head. "Well then, what can I help you with?" "I need training weights to get stronger." Kibo studied the boy for a moment, and looked into his eyes to see a determination there that had been lacking before. A slow smile spread across his face as he started nodding. "Yes, I think I can do that. Come in back with me." He looked at the clock on the wall behind the counter. "Kido, close up, we're done for tonight, and then, some tea, tonight's a working night." Kido looked at her husband and then at Naruto, getting the idea she went and locked the door, turning the sign to closed and pulling down the blinds on the windows before going into the back and starting to make the tea. Kibo guided Naruto into the back room. "My wife and I live on the 2nd floor. Back here is where I work on my projects." There was a twinkle in his eye as he showed Naruto the back room, filled with cloth and tools, leather and metal, dressing dummies and charts. One of the tables was indeed covered with a suit that Naruto guessed Kibo had been working on, but Kibo just picked it all up and moved it, leaving the table clear. "Now my boy, tell me again what you really need." "Training weights," Naruto was about to say, but stopped himself and thought about it. What did he really need? To get stronger and faster, yes, but what else? To become the greatest shinobi, so people will respect me. Good answer. And then Kibo pulled out a head protector from a drawer and put it on. On it was the symbol of leaf. "I'm guessing that you're in the academy?" Naruto nodded dumbly as he looked at the head protector. "Well, forget them. Go to school and pass your classes, whatever, but it doesn't matter." Naruto's eyes widened with shock at what he was saying. "Calm down kid, trust him. This is the first human I've seen that is sensible." Kyuubi growled to him, amused as he watched what was going on through Naruto's eyes. Kibo held his hands up when he saw Naruto's reaction. "Relax kid, trust me when I say that you will use the techniques they teach, but there are a lot better things you can learn." He smiled as he watched Naruto relax a little. "Good, now that we have that out of the way we can get down to serious business." Now, I notice you don't have any of the usual equipment, no kunai or shuriken, no weapons at all, no scrolls or even an equipment pouch. Naruto shook his head. He didn't have any of that stuff of his own. He learned some stuff from the scrolls that he got from the academy, but most of them he never used. And he used the practice kunai and shuriken at school, but he didn't have any of his own. It was at this point that Kido walked in with a tray. On the tray was a teapot and 3 cups. She walked over to the table and set down the cups, pouring green tea in each. Kido sat down across from his wife and Naruto followed suit, sitting on one of the stools around the table. Kido used to be a teacher at the academy, she said as she passed Naruto one of the teacups. Naruto took the teacup and sipped the tea, sitting in silence. His eyes went back to Kido and the head protector. That was 15 years ago, before I left to travel. I learned a lot, and I suggest you try it sometime as well, but when you're older and ready. Now, business has been quite brisk, a lot more than I had expected. And I could use an assistant. You're probably wondering how this will help you. Naruto nodded. Well, here it goes. I'm going to teach you how to mold chakra into your fingers individually, and I use the skill for cutting cloth. He demonstrated by reaching into a trash can and pulling out a discarded piece of blue fabric. He closed his eyes and held up the pointer finger of his other hand as he laid the fabric down on the table. There was a little glow around his finger that gathered into a point of light that he put down onto the fabric and pulled it across the surface, neatly cutting the piece in half, even burning the edges so there could be no fraying. That is very high-level control, a very good skill to learn, said Kyuubi from inside his mind, sounding impressed. I will also teach you how to wrap it around kunai and needles. I use it so it will do less damage to the fabric that I'm working with. You will learn about colors and dyes, how they blend and change. This will help you learn how to hide and blend into the background. I will show you how to make and repair your own equipment and clothing, something every shinobi should know how to do. Kido sat back and sipped his tea as his wife spoke up. My husband and I are in agreement that what is taught at the academy is not what should be taught, but he is happy to use his skills just for the store. I am more open-minded. Kido rolled his eyes at that, but his wife ignored him. I will teach you how to use those skills in battle after the store closes. I will show you a taijutsu fighting style that will show you how to properly use the skills that he will teach you. I will also be teaching you how to make kunai and shuriken specifically for you, best fit to your hand, and how to mold chakra into them in ways that your opponent won't expect. Naruto was overwhelmed. He had expected to walk in, buy some weights, and maybe talk for a minute. But now he was being offered the chance to have 2 more teachers. He didn't know what to do. It seemed like so much for him. Take it, kid, this is an excellent offer. One will teach you better control than I have been so far and teach you practical skills like how to take care of your stuff, something I never had to do. And the other will teach you how to make weapons, take care of them and use them, something I never needed in a taijutsu style, something I couldn't teach you because I've never been human. This will allow me to work with you and teach you more jutsu and build your stamina. Kyuubi was ecstatic. This was perfect. Drink your tea, think about it. I realized this must be a lot to take in. Naruto nodded as he obediently sipped his tea. It really was quite good. With the training you'll get, we can promise that you'll get the respect that you deserve. And that was all Naruto had to hear. I'll do it, Naruto proclaimed as he set his cup down. When do I show up? Tomorrow after school, come by and we'll have everything set up for you. Kido said, beaming at him. Oh yay, before you go. Kido walked over to Naruto and did some hand seals very quickly before reaching out and touching Naruto's jacket, and then the leg of his pants. A moment later Naruto felt the weight of his jacket and pants increase to a point where he had some trouble standing up. You said you wanted weights, well there you go. Now go on home and get a good night's rest, tomorrow's going to be a long day. Naruto wondered what he had gotten himself into as he waved a weighted arm at them and walked heavily down the street back to his apartment. But he couldn't help smiling all the way. He had 2 more teachers and he was getting better. He was going to be great someday. And so it went for 2 long years. Naruto goofed off in school, doing only enough to pass and not get in too much trouble that he's kept late, keeping his reputation as dead last. Naruto found school more and more boring as he ended up learning more and had more fun when he wasn't in school. Whether he was learning a new technique from Kyuubi, like Danton, Jishin Handu no Jutsu, Earth type, Earthquake kick technique, that concentrated a large amount of chakra into his foot, and when he brought it down on the ground, would send out a shockwave that could knock down trees, if directed properly, or could send out a shockwave in all directions if he wanted it to. Or one of many fire techniques, such as Kaiden, Kitsune Fukumin Bakushin, fire type, Fox Mask Dash technique. A fire technique that made a fox head appear on the end of a rope of fire that would chase after any visible target at high speed so long as Naruto could exhale and keep the technique up. From Kibo, Naruto learned fast and efficient ways to concentrate chakra into his hands. As Naruto got better, he would mold the chakra into a blade around his hand, and use it to assist Kibo with making clothes. Kibo insisted on talking as they worked, so Naruto told him what had gone on during the day while Kibo would tell him anything of interest that happened in the store. This improved Naruto's concentration. Kibo impressed Naruto with his ability to, with one finger, cut the steel mesh that he used for extra weight and protection of the clothes that he sold to Shinobi, for that was who his biggest customers were. Naruto learned different sewing styles and how each piece of clothing was sewn together. When he was good enough to concentrate the chakra around a single finger, Kibo started to show him how to wrap the chakra around a needle so it would put less stress on the fabric than just forcing the needle through. He was even shown how to emboss leather to create patterns and make it easier to fold and use. When Naruto made his first kunai holster, after 6 months, he embossed a stylized fox head on it. In congratulations, Kibo allowed him to keep it and said that he was now ready to work solo in the back room. Naruto accepted and enjoyed the quiet time in the back room, because it was what Kyuubi considered nap time, and it was really the only time the great fox slept, training Naruto in his sleep about history or tactics concerning different terrains, enemies, and a myriad of other things other than just new techniques. But while Naruto worked in the back room, or with Kito, Kyuubi slept. Kito was a harsh taskmaster, pushing Naruto to ever higher goals in strength, speed, and endurance. But she was also patient, helping Naruto perfect his stance and the flow of movements time and time again. Naruto learned how to use weapons properly instead of just, what she called, the flim-flam, that he learned at the academy. When she thought he was ready, she taught Naruto how to use the small forge that she kept in the backyard. He learned how to work the metal and repair damaged kunai and shuriken, as well as making molds to fit his hands, and learning how to melt and pour the metal to make his own sets of weapons. He also learned to make blades and metal folding techniques to increase the strength. The taijutsu was not, as Naruto had expected, just one style, but 5, and Kito expected him to learn each flawlessly before he made his own form from them. There was the earth style, one of hard kicks and punches concentrating chakra into a fist or foot to increase the power of the impact, and into the body to harden and guard against the attacks of others. The fire style that used feints and diversions to distract from the actual attack, concentrating the chakra in a special manner to make after images that threw off the opponent while making burning punches and kicks with the same concentrated chakra that he used for the cloth. The water style that focused on using your opponent's strength against them through flowing movements, using chakra to catch the opponent's attack and make it impossible for them to get out of his grip. The wind style, another flowing style, but much faster, used to get inside an opponent's guard when they attacked and making slashing attacks with the hands concentrating chakra into the fingers to burn his opponent. And the last style, lightning style, pure speed to dodge, as piercing attacks were made with the pointer and middle finger. Chakra formed around each so that they came together into a point, designed to immobilize the opponent by targeting specific pressure points and joints. Though he could never beat her in a fight, he did learn all the stances and movements. And every time, at the start of the week, either Kibo or Kito would come to him, making hand seals and increasing the weight of Naruto's jacket and pants. Naruto spent his entire time training until finally 2 years had passed since the start of school and Naruto had turned 12, and had his first actual birthday with Kibo and Kito, a very emotional experience for him. It was also time for the first genin exam for his class. Naruto was surprised that so much time had passed. To him it was all a blur. But he had changed, that much was obvious. No longer was he the shy, repressed boy that he had been before, now he was smiling more, and instead of letting all the glares and cold looks get to him, he ignored them. But the only time that he ever fully came out of his shell was when he was with Kibo and Kito, laughing, joking, and pulling some practical jokes, something he was very good at. He also found out that he had, what felt like, unlimited energy, letting him train or work in the back room for long periods of time without resting. Naruto also took to carrying around with him a sketch pad that he would draw in, sketching any new styles of clothing or ideas that came to him for patterns. Once a week the three of them would sit down with his sketches and talk about them, and they would pick one or two things and test them out, and if they sold well then Naruto would make more and keep a part of the money made from them. But there was one thing about Naruto that didn't change over those 2 years. The book that he had gotten that fateful night, he kept it with him at all times, in a protected pocket of his jacket. Naruto was lost in thought about forearm protectors and if there was a way to increase the mobility without taking away from the defense that they provided, when his name was called for the test. He had to be called 2 more times and have the kid next to him kick his leg under the table before Naruto responded. Huh? Naruto looked up confused. Mizuki, one of the other teachers, rolled his eyes and shook his head. Iruka frowned. I said that it's your turn, Naruto, unless you don't think you can pass the test. There were several sniggers from the students and Naruto blushed in embarrassment. He got up and went down to the front of the class while the students murmured and pointed behind him. Naruto stepped in front of the desk that both Iruka and Mizuki were sitting behind, when he realized he didn't know what he had to do. Naruto scratches the back of his head, embarrassed anew. What do I have to do again? The students behind him started to laugh and Iruka rubbed his forehead. You have to make 2 clones using the Bunshin no Jutsu, and then use a Henge no Jutsu, transformation technique, to look like either me or Iruka. Mizuki explained. You get 3 chances at each. Oh, okay. Naruto smiled as he decided to have some fun as this would be the last day in the class. He jumped up flipping over in the air calling out the word. Henge. Naruto landed looking just like Iruka except that from behind he had a sign that said, Kick me. The students burst out laughing except for one boy in black hair who just scowled at the stupid antics of the dead last student. Huh? What? Did I do something wrong? Naruto turned to look at the rest of the class, his back facing the 2 teachers so they could see the sign. He then changed back, smiling as the rest of the students continued to laugh. But Iruka was not laughing. He glared at Mizuki who wasn't trying very hard to cover his smile. Naruto, the exercise was for you to make a copy of me exactly. Iruka said as he stood up, upset about being made the butt of the joke. So you don't have a kick me sign on your back? Naruto saw Mizuki glance at Iruka from behind as he sipped some water, followed by him almost choking on his water. Iruka turned and looked at Mizuki, confusion growing as the class burst out into laughter once again. Iruka's eyes grew wide with anger and confusion as he reached behind his back and felt the paper. He ripped it off, not even bothering to read it as he balled it up angrily and threw it away. Now he couldn't say that Naruto hadn't preformed the henge correctly. Some of the smarter students were watching Naruto carefully. That trick that he just pulled was a combination of things that Naruto, as dead last, shouldn't have been able to do. It was very fast, very stealthy, and only a few people noticed what he was doing. Iruka hadn't because he thought Naruto was too low to pull something like that, and Mizuki hadn't seen it because he was watching one of the female teachers walk past the open door. But several of the smarter students noted that Naruto was hiding something, namely, his true skill level. Naruto went on to perform the Bunshin no Jutsu, accidentally making 4 clones instead of just 2, because he was used to needing the extra chakra for making Kage Bunshin to spar against. The 4 clones looked at each other in slight confusion before smiling and they started singing a barbershop quartet song that Kibo loved to listen to while they worked. The real Naruto stepped forward and looked at the teachers. So, do I pass? Iruka was pissed and glared at the clones as the song ended and they disappeared in a puff of smoke as each part stopped. Yes, Naruto, you passed. Mizuki picked up one of the head protectors that was on the desk and passed it to Naruto. You must have spent all night practicing those. Yep, took me forever to get it right. Naruto lied as he took the head protector and tied it on. He then turned and walked back to the seat, feeling on top of the world as a few of the students congratulated him on his prank. Naruto sat down at his chair and noticed something was wrong. It took him a moment to figure out what it was. His notebook was gone. Hey, my notebook. Where is it? Naruto looked around and under the desk. Naruto got worried when he couldn't find it. Then he saw 2 boys looking down at a notebook that looked just like his. He ran towards them. Hey, give it back. Naruto shouted as he tried to grab it. Monban, one of the kids looking at the notebook, grabbed it out of Naruto's reach, reading aloud. Double layers of silk used more often than single? What is this? Been reading women's clothing magazines? He laughed and threw the notebook to someone else. Naruto leapt after the notebook, grabbing it and stuffing it into his jacket. He landed hard on the ground due to the amount of weight that he was wearing after approximately 17 weight increases, leaving it at roughly 300 pounds. Everyone was surprised when the wood floor cracked and everyone felt it as the room shook a bit. Naruto, go back to your seat, Iruka said angrily at the interruption. When Naruto went back to his chair, there were 2 cracked indentations where he had landed. Congratulations, kid, Kyuubi said to Naruto, sarcasm dripping. You got your head protector. Gave away that you're not dead last to anyone who even thought about what you did. Gave away that you're wearing weights, and a weakness, that stupid notebook of yours. Naruto knew that Kyuubi was right, but that didn't stop him from being upset. He spent the rest of the day quiet and withdrawn, not responding even when one of his classmates approached him, wondering how he had gotten the sign attached to Iruka. When they were dismissed, Naruto walked out in silence, while the other students were congratulated by their parents who had come to pick them up. Happy cries of children and parents only pushed him deeper into his depression. He didn't even notice when a girl made to follow after him and was stopped by a man, her father, who shook his head, and they both watched in silence as the boy walked away. One set of pale lavender eyes watching him, sorry to see the boy who was so happy only a little while ago, turn into the depressed one walking alone. Does he always leave alone? Hyuga Hiyashi asked his daughter. Why, yes, father, stuttered Hyuga Hinata. She looked up at her father and saw that he had activated the bloodline limit of their family, the Byakugan, and followed the retreating back of the boy with his eyes. Hiyashi nodded a little as it deactivated. He is stronger than people give him credit for. He will make quite a name for himself in the future. He looked down at his daughter, who was looking up at him confused, and he gave her one of his rare smiles. Watch him, you'll see. Now Hinata, I believe some of your friends are having a party to celebrate. I will send someone from the branch house to pick you up in a few hours. With that, he turned and walked away, headed back to the estate. Hinata's friends called out to her to join them, and she looked back towards Naruto and saw he was already out of sight. She then went to join her friends, wondering what her father had meant. Naruto walked towards the shop, his feet on automatic as he was deep in thought about his book that he almost didn't notice when he had gotten to the store. He pushed open the door and stepped inside, wondering why the lights were turned off when suddenly they turned on and Kibo and Kido jumped out from behind the counter. Congratulations, they both chorused. Kibo walked over and thumped him on the back. Always knew you would do it, now you're a true shinobi. And you've got the forehead protector to prove it. The man was beaming at him as he thumped him on the back once again. Naruto couldn't help but break into a smile. Kido grabbed him and pulled him into a tight hug, and kissed him on his cheeks, making him blush. We're so proud of you. This is a big step for you, and you've got to be ready for what is to come in the future. But, I thought you said that the academy was stupid. That it wasn't important. Naruto was happy and confused at the same time, happy that they were congratulating him, but confused because the congratulations weren't making any sense to him. Silly kid, we're congratulating you for getting out of the school and starting your life as a shinobi. Come on, we've got cake and drinks in the back. And so Naruto was ushered into the back room where there was indeed cake and drinks. When Naruto saw the banner that hung above the cake that said, "Congratulations Naruto," he started to cry. Without comment, both Kibo and Kido hugged him. They both knew that Naruto had had a hard life, far harder than most people who lived in Leaf. This boy who had so much potential, and such a good heart, had been broken by the cruelties of the people of the village they called home. They held him for a few minutes until his crying slowly backed down until he was just holding the two of them close to him. Thank you. He let go of them and stepped back. For caring about me, he wiped away the tears on his cheek with the sleeve of his jacket. I shouldn't be crying, I'm sorry. Kido walked up to him and put a hand on his cheek, making her look up at her. It's all right to cry, when you're happy. Naruto smiled at them. Come on, Kibo said kindly, leading Naruto over to the table. Let's eat before the flies get to it. Naruto smiled again and wiped his tears away as they sat down to eat. Naruto told them how he had passed the exam and they laughed along with him, though Kyuubi grumbled in the background of Naruto's mind. Well, Tomorrow you'll get assigned a Junin instructor, and they'll give you your final test. Kibo said, leaning back in a chair, a drink in one hand. Final test? Naruto asked around a mouthful of cake. Yes, Naruto, final test, Kido answered. Your instructor will test you and your team to see if you are ready to actually become Genin. The test varies from Junin to Junin, so I can't give you any tips on how to pass. But just remember this, you were put into teams for a reason. You won't be just one person, but a team. And you'll have us, our training, and other things we've taught you. Kibo reached over to pat Naruto on the back. And one more thing, at this Kibo gripped Naruto's shoulder firmly and looked into his eyes. The boy's eyes met him as he listened intently. Never give up and you can overcome any challenge. He reached over and patted the book in Naruto's jacket pocket. The Yondiami said that. Naruto remembered those words, and he would never forget them so long as he lived. Now, before you go Naruto, we have some things to give you. Kito reached under the main work table and pulled out several things. A long metal box depicting the 5 elements coming together at a central point symbolized by the yin-yang. When opened 5 scrolls were revealed, each with the symbol of the 5 elements that he studied with her. A kit of needles and thread with a scroll of their own. And finally a necklace, a fox pendant, the small body made of brass, the tails wrapping up around it made of a red opalescent material that seemed to glow on its own, each ending in a white tip. Red ruby eyes looking out, burning with inner fire. Naruto could hardly tear his eyes away from the necklace when Kido started to speak again. Now Naruto, this is very important. The scrolls in this case are my clan's legacy. Her hands rested on the metal case. I am the last of my clan, and because of a disease that whipped out all the others, I cannot bear children. Kibo came up behind her and put his arms around her. In the short time we've known each other, Naruto, you have become part of our family. She reached up to wipe away a tear. The son we could never have. Now before you say anything, we both talked it over long and hard last night. We feel that you are the best person to trust with these. Inside each of the scrolls are the final parts of the training that we didn't get to and the final attack for each. Because of the special chakra flowing techniques I taught you, they can't be copied, you would have to teach how to do it. She took a deep breath and looked Naruto directly in his eyes. If you accept, you must promise to never teach any of these to anyone who is not part of your family. Naruto looked at her, his mouth hanging open for a minute. He thought about what she had said, about the scrolls and what they meant. The trust that she was placing on his shoulders, and then he thought about the most important thing she had said, overshadowing all others in his mind. You have become part of our family, the son we could never have. And his mind was made up. He closed his mouth and nodded to her. I give you my word. Kido smiled at him as he closed the box. Give me your hands. He did. She placed his hands on the top of the box and her hands on top of his. Bando Tensou no Jutsu. Lock transfer technique. Naruto felt a spark leap from her hands to his, and then, feeling the spark take a little of his chakra, jumped to the box, which glowed red for a moment. When they lifted their hands, the pattern had changed. Now it depicted a fox with 9 tails, 5 tails reaching out to form a pentagram, each one symbolizing a different element, and the 4 remaining tails circling around a central yin-yang, the fox standing protectively over it. When he saw the fox depiction, his first reaction was to step back, feeling he had done something wrong. He looked up at Kido, who was looking at the box, a small smile playing on her lips. Don't be afraid, boy, it's all right. We already knew, and by the look of it so do you. But I won't ask how you found out. Kibo said, looking at Naruto. I knew you were the container for the Kyuubi when you told me your name that first day. So does everyone else, though they are forbidden to tell it to the younger generation. That's why they looked at you so coldly. They think of you as the demon and blame you for what happened 11 years ago. Then, why treat me like this, like a son? Naruto stammered. Because, Naruto. Kido said, walking over to him and putting a hand on his cheek. You aren't the demon. You are a boy with a great responsibility. Most people can't see that, but we did. And don't you ever forget it. You are Uzumaki Naruto, not the demon Kyuubi, and we love you as a son. And she hugged him again, pulling him tightly into her embrace. Naruto hugged her back just as tightly. He had a family now. Now onto my gift, Kibo said after they had broken the hug. He reached over and picked up the small sewing kit and scroll, handing them to Naruto. The sewing kit is yours to keep. Remember, a ninja is always self-sufficient. Keep your clothes in good condition and they will last as long as you need them for. Besides, you'd be surprised how much more a woman appreciates a man who can fix the holes in his socks. He winked at Kito and they all laughed. And that scroll contains nothing as special as the ones my wife gave you. But it does contain a useful genjutsu, the Hatajisu no Jutsu, body camouflage technique. It basically takes a picture of your surroundings and surrounds you with it, so as long as you don't move you appear to vanish. The scroll also has the jutsu for altering weight, the one we used on your jacket and pants for training. Now you'll be able to alter them whenever you want. And now, for your final gift. Kito picked up the necklace on a silver chain and walked behind Naruto, putting it around his neck and locking the latch. Taking his hand, she put it over the lock and repeated the jutsu that she had used on him in the box. The chain glowed for a moment before turning a deep red. Only you can remove the necklace or open the box. It will only recognize your chakra. There is a jutsu carved into the back of the pendant. It will absorb any of the extra chakra that you give off. It can hold a fair amount before it stops. To reclaim the power that it has stored, put your hand over it and say the name of your furry friend. She looked at Naruto and then pointedly at his belly. Huh? Naruto was confused. My name, you fool, Kyuubi. He objected to being called Naruto's furry friend, but not too loudly. Oh, Naruto's eyes widened as he finally got it. Right, I got it. We figure that with you being a ninja now, you won't be able to work here anymore. This thought had not occurred to Naruto and it looked like he was suddenly conflicted. Don't worry, we knew this day would come, though not like this. You'll still visit us, right? Of course I will. Naruto smiled as he took out his notebook. I've still got things in here to talk with you about. They all smiled and settled in. Naruto opened to the page where he was working on new forearm protectors. I was thinking about double-layered leather, with it sewn so that metal slats can be slipped inside for added protection. My problem is that I can't find a way of one-handedly putting them on with them being fully secure. Well, let's see what you've got. Kito looked at the pages and smiled. They spent the rest of the night talking about the forearm protectors. It was late before Naruto left the shop after giving each of them a big hug. The metal box under his arm, the sewing kit and scroll in his pocket, and wearing the necklace, Naruto was happier than he had ever been before. Naruto woke early the next day at Kyuubi's insistence, starting with his daily run and then running to the academy where his team and Junin instructor would be assigned. Naruto was now wearing the forehead protector and the kitsune pendant necklace, though he kept the necklace hidden under his shirt. Naruto made excellent time as he had released the jutsu on his clothing, allowing it to return to its normal weight. Now, some 200 pounds lighter, he was almost a blur as he ran. That's why I said to remove it. We don't know what will happen today or what this final test might be. It's best that you learn the difference between your weighted clothes and not, so you can use your body to the best of your abilities. Kyuubi said to him, laughing as Naruto skidded to a halt outside the shinobi school. Only one person saw Naruto arrive. Haruno Sakura almost screamed as the orange figure slid to a halt just in front of her. But she didn't scream, she fainted. Naruto watched as the girl crumpled, confused as to why she had fainted. He walked up to her cautiously. Sakura? He had never had much to do with the girl. He thought she was cute, but he had seen how she acted around one of the other boys in the class, Uchiha Sasuke. His thoughts were brushed away as she started to wake up. Are you alright? You fainted. Idiot, Sakura jumped up. You shouldn't run up to a girl like that. I thought you were attacking me. That confused Naruto, but he apologized. I'm sorry, I always run to school in the morning, and I got excited. Trying desperately to think of a reason for him showing up early and so fast without giving up anything about himself. Huh, right. She obviously didn't believe him. Sakura looked around and sighed. Come on, why are you really here? I always get here first and you usually get here last, but today you almost run me over to get to class? She started walking to the classroom, Naruto followed. It's hard to explain. They walked into the empty room. Haruka's bag behind the desk showing that he was already there. Probably went out to get a bite to eat before class started. Whatever. Sakura turned to look at her classmate. There was something different today. He moved so fast earlier, the way he carried himself was better, not hunched like he was weighed down. There was a spring in his step seeming to say that he was full of unreleased energy. Look, what was with that book yesterday? I heard the bit about double layering of silk. But why would YOU have a notebook with stuff like that in it? Her stance showed that she was going to get an answer one way or another. Naruto sighed. I live alone, and I needed a way to earn money after the orphanage kicked me out. Naruto explained, but Sakura was already confused. Orphanage? Kicked out? Living alone? She had never known any of this, and when she thought about it, she didn't know anything about him at all, so she listened to his story. So, I got a job at a clothing store. And well, I would do, scouting, for the owners. He was trying to think up a suitable lie so he wouldn't have to give up anything about Kibo and Keto. I would see what people were wearing and taking notes, and they would pay me for keeping them ahead of the other stores. Sakura looked at him for a long moment and then nodded, seeming to buy into his lie. That was smart of them. No one would suspect someone like you of scouting for a clothing store. Other people were arriving now, and Sakura moved away to fawn over the Uchiha as soon as he walked in the door, leaving Naruto alone again. But he was used to being alone and went back to his usual seat in the back. Naruto sat, not really paying attention to what was going on, instead practicing his hand seals for his new attack Kaden. Ryuzahain Hitofuki no Jutsu, Fire type. Dragon Wing Gust technique. A technique that let him summon fiery dragon wings that he could control for a short period of time. When his name was called he looked up startled and forgot what he was doing, and for a moment he put power into the jutsu causing a heat shimmer in the air on either side of him that dissipated quickly. Naruto, pay attention when someone's talking to you. Iruka sounded irritated as Naruto had been ignoring him calling his name 5 times. I was assigning you to a team. He looked back down at his clipboard. Uzumaki Naruto, Haruno Sakura, and Uchiha Sasuke, you will be Team 7. Sensei, Sakura spoke up? As much as I appreciate being on the same team as Sasuke. Sakura blushed at that. Why'd I have to be on a team with Naruto? That comment really stung Naruto and his shoulders slumped as he looked down at his desk. Sakura, the teams are put together so as to balance out the members of the team. You, Sakura, are the best in class at the mental aspects, while Sasuke is the highest with physical aspects. Naruto on the other hand is the lowest at both and it was necessary for you 3 of you to be put on the same team. I am sure that Sasuke and you can make up for any of Naruto's shortcomings. Maybe if he's lucky something of you will rub off on him. I'm sure you two will be fine. Iruka smirked at Naruto before going back to read from his list the names of the members of the other teams. After all the different teams had been called, the students were told to wait in class for their Junin instructors to show up. Several of the team's new teachers walked in immediately, seeming to say they had been waiting to take their teams. Soon there was less than half of the originating class, but no sign of the instructor for Team 7. After half an hour there were 2 teams left, 7 and 8. Kiba was playing ball with Akamaru, bouncing the ball off the wall or floor and having the dog jump after it. Shino was sitting by an open window, though no one could tell, he was watching a spider catch a butterfly in its web. Though he had quite an affinity for insects he knew better than to interfere. Though it may save the butterfly the spider would starve. So instead he watched as the butterfly was wrapped in silk by the spider, learning from it. Hinata was doing something a little more covert than Shino. With her bloodline activated he was watching Naruto, though her back was turned to him. Her bloodline limit, the Byakugan, or white eyes, allowed her to see everything around her in a full 360 degrees, and see through objects and follow chakra flow. What she saw now made no sense. Naruto was sitting at an angle behind her as she pretended to watch Kiba and his dog. Naruto's chakra supply was one of the largest she had ever seen, especially for a genie level, and yet he was called dead last. She couldn't figure out why. She was going to keep watching him, but it was at that point that the door opened and a woman walked in with the leaf forehead protector resting on her brow. I am Yuhi Kurenai. Everyone was looking at her now, except for Naruto, who seemed oblivious. I got the wrong time for picking up my team. She looked around the room a little confused. I am here for Team 8, you other 3, you're Team 7 correct? Sakura nodded. Do you know where our instructor is? Did something happen to him? While Sakura didn't mind spending time with Sasuke, she didn't like waiting. Kurenai sighed and shook her head. I am afraid that your teacher has been known for coming late. There is nothing I can do. She beckoned for her students. Kiba laughed as he walked towards the door. What are the odds? The team with the dead last gets the dead last teacher. Shino didn't react as he also walked towards the door. Hinata however stopped and looked back at the last team and then at Kurenai. See, could they come with us? She looked at Kurenai and then couldn't help but glance back towards the boy in orange at the back of the room that still had not moved, or even reacted that they could tell since the woman walked into the room. The glance was not lost on Kurenai, who also looked up at the boy in the back row for a moment. Sakura and Sasuke looked at Kurenai intently, waiting for her decision. I don't see why not, she said after a moment. It's his fault for being late anyway. I'll leave a note for him. She walked over to the blackboard and started writing a note for the late Junin. Sakura and Sasuke had started for the door, and after a moment Naruto shook his head and looked around. His eyes gained a faraway look as if he was thinking. Kurenai finished her note and turned to see Naruto watching her. She was shocked by his eyes as he walked towards the door. So blue, so cold, they reminded her of ice, of bitter cold. She suppressed a shudder as the boy walked past her and out into the hallway with the others before following him out. She knew that he had led a harsh life and honestly felt sorry for him, but she could not show it or she would be in trouble with the other nin, especially those who lost family to the Kyuubi. Naruto was deep into a game of chess with Kyuubi, something that he took very seriously because he hated losing and he never managed to beat that damn fox yet. Suddenly Kyuubi had yelled at him to pay attention and he looked up to find the other people walking down the hall, headed outside. He followed after them, not realizing the pale-eyed girl was following him, watching him intently. As they walked, Kurenai explained a little about what their duties would be as genin. Basically the lowest of the low jobs, babysitting, weeding gardens, walking dogs, picking up things and making deliveries, and that would progress until they passed to the next level. Then they would get harder jobs to suit their abilities. But for now they were stuck with the small things. Among them only two people didn't say anything, Naruto, who was absorbed in his game, and Shino, because he doesn't talk often. They got to training area 8. Kurenai stopped them in a clearing. Alright, I need to get an idea of each of your abilities so I'll know your strengths and weaknesses and see where you need the most help, so do your best to impress me. Kurenai said, looking at each of the tree on her team. Now, you pick the method by which you will show me. This was her test. She gave them a goal. Impress her. There were a variety of methods that they could try. Survival test. Ask her to set up an obstacle course. Have them fight against her to test them, but in her eyes, those were the wrong answers. The way to pass would be to spar against each other, so that not only she would know their strengths and weaknesses, but the entire team. The members of Team 8 looked at each other, thinking the best way for them to impress her. A fight, of course, it's the best way. We should each fight Kurenai-sensei so she can know how good we are. Kiba said loudly. Akamaru barked in agreement. Hinata looked at Kurenai, obviously not wanting to fight her, and looked down, biting her lip and pressing her fingers together. Shino looked thoughtful. No, it was the first thing Shino had said in her presence, and it wasn't very loud, but it had an instant effect. It would not be fair for us to fight against her, and she should not be the only one to know our weaknesses. Kurenai was surprised. Shino had gotten it right on the first try, whereas Kiba had made the common mistake of overconfidence in his skills when challenging someone far superior to him in skills. What should we do then? Hinata stuttered, but she looked relieved at the thought of not fighting their teacher. We should fight each other. Hinata paused for a moment between finger taps and looked at Shino. She didn't like the idea, but he was right. It was probably the best way, so she nodded in agreement. Hold on, we don't have enough people. We would need to fight one-on-one for that, but we don't have enough time for two to fight and then rest while the other is still fresh. Now it was Kiba's turn to surprise her. He was also right, it wouldn't be fair. We should still do it, rotating, so we can see how we fight when at our strongest and weakened. And there it was, the final piece. Kurenai smiled. Shino would make a good leader, cool-headed and logical. It was at this point that a man jumped down from a tree on the Kahona side of the field. Everyone turned to look at it save Naruto, who was losing his game of chess and quite frustrated. The man was dressed in black pants and jacket, a Junin vest on over the jacket, worn with use. He was also wearing a mask over the lower half of his face, and his forehead protector was angled down over his left eye, covering it completely. His silver hair stood out in the mostly dark clothing. Hitaki Kakashi, instructor of Team 7. He scratched the back of his head as if embarrassed. Sorry I'm late, this little boy asked me to help with his homework. He could not keep up the lie under the other Junin's glare as she stalked over to him. Kakashi, Today you were supposed to pick up your students. She was only a few feet away from Kakashi now. You're over an hour late now. I'm here now, okay? Kakashi looked over at his team. Team 7, follow me, we're going to our own training area. He turned and headed away to another area. Sakura looked at Sasuke and then together they went after Kakashi. A moment later Naruto looked up from his seat under a tree and followed after them. Kurenai watched as Kakashi walked away. I hope you know what you are getting yourself into, Kakashi. She murmured to no one. And you better treat him well, or you'll have more than you can handle. She then turned back to her students and spoke out loud to them all. Alright, first, Shino against Kiba, and then Hinata against the winner while the loser rests. Kakashi led the three to another training area. He took them to an open area with 3 wooden stumps standing in a row. Kakashi jumps up onto the middle stump and sits down facing his young charges. Alright, introduce yourselves. First you, he pointed at Sasuke. I am Uchiha Sasuke. I don't like many things at all. My dreams are reviving my clan and, to kill a certain man. He spoke with complete seriousness. Sakura stared at Sasuke. To her it was the most awesome, incredible thing he could have said. Kakashi looked as if he had expected that answer and sighed. Naruto on the other hand had pulled a fork attack on Kyuubi and had managed to take down the demon fox's queen, so he was smiling happily, completely oblivious to the angst around him. I see, well then, how about you? Kakashi said, looking at Sakura this time. Me? Okay, well, there is someone I like. Sakura blushed as her gaze darted to Sasuke, who completely ignored her. My dreams are? Again she looked at Sasuke, blushing even more. And as for things I hate? Well, rivals. Damn you Ino pig. There was silence after her loud outburst. Kakashi sighed. He really didn't want to deal with a lovesick girl going through puberty. Naruto was scowling now. The outburst had distracted him and he had just lost because he misplaced a piece. Kyuubi's laughing didn't help either. And lastly, you, Kakashi pointed at Naruto. Huh? Naruto paused and listened to the last few minutes again in his mind, reviewing what he had to tell. Oh right, I am Uzumaki Naruto, I like my teachers. Sakura stared at him. Everyone knew that Iruka had always been mean to him. How could he like his teachers? Wait, teachers, plural? Was there someone else teaching him? Kakashi had also picked up on that. I don't like mean people. And as for my dreams, I really want to become the greatest shinobi ever, greater than the Yondaime, so everyone will respect me. Sasuke almost laughed. The dead last become greater than the 4th Hokage. It was never going to happen. Sakura looked at Naruto and wondered, what was it about this boy that made him want to be so great, even though everyone appeared to hate him? Kakashi smiled under his mask. This boy was interesting. He could already tell that this boy had great potential, and possibly, had already started to tap into it. Alright, it's late now, show up tomorrow here at 7 sharp and we'll see if you're ready to really become genin. And don't eat a breakfast, you'll regret it. And with that he disappeared in a puff of smoke. What did he mean by that? If we're ready to really become genin, I thought we were already genin. Sakura voiced her confusion to the other 2 members of her team. He's going to test us. Sakura was surprised that it was Naruto that spoke up. Yesterday we were just tested to see if we had the skills to be a genin. Tomorrow we're going to be tested to be actual genin. I intend to be ready. He started to walk away. And I suggest that you do eat something tomorrow. We all need to be at our best. Sakura watched as Naruto walked away, and almost missed Sasuke walking away as well. But she didn't, and she turned and ran up to Sasuke pestering him with questions, but this time it wasn't just about him or her, she wanted to know about Naruto. This seemed to annoy Sasuke more than her just talking, but to ask about the dead last in his presence ticked him off. He was the best, Naruto was the worst. There was nothing else that mattered in his mind other than strength. Naruto didn't head home immediately. Instead he walked to his own training area, practicing the stances of the element styles. His eyes closed, he went through each of the movements slowly, feeling the movement of each muscle as he pulled in for a block or extended for an attack. Slowly, he sped up his attacks and found himself attaining new speeds without his weights. He even had to readjust himself so that he didn't get ahead of his abilities in terms of control. Slowly, he worked on building his speed, until he could go through the moves flawlessly at about half of full speed. Naruto finished his training a little while after the sun had fallen below the horizon. He made his way home, feeling elated at his newly recognized strength and speed. Naruto came up with a plan to fully utilize his jutsu that changed the weights and decided that he would continue to add weight like Kito and Kibo had done, and only remove it if he needed to fight. Even then, it would only be reduced by half, unless he absolutely needed to be rid of it all. When he got home, Naruto got out some instant ramen for his dinner. He didn't have it often, having learned to eat better from Kito's lectures on nutrition, but felt that he deserved it tonight. He settled down on the couch with the steaming bowl. "Am I really ready?" Naruto asked aloud, which he only ever did when he was alone. "Yes. You are strong enough, you have enough techniques, and you have the speed as well. You need to work on strategy, but for that you've got me. You'll be fine." Kyuubi was doing the equivalent of curling up to go to sleep. "No teaching tonight. Just dream and relax, you'll need to be at your best tomorrow. I will not allow my container to fail the exam." And with that the great nine-tailed demon fox drifted off to sleep, dreaming of great nine-tailed demon vixen. When Naruto went to sleep, he had some odd dreams indeed. The next day, Naruto came early to the Team 7 training area, foregoing his usual run. He had set the weight of his clothes to full weight, but was ready to take some of it off should he need to. Naruto had eaten a good breakfast and was feeling at full strength. He had even brought some things with him to keep him occupied until the time arrived. Naruto pulled a piece of leather from the bag as well as a thick needle and heavy waxed string. Using his chakra training from Kibo, Naruto brought a light amount to the palm of his hand and ran it along both sides of the leather, heating it and making it easier to work with. His goal today was to make some sturdy forearm bracers. When the piece he was working on became ready, he rolled up the sleeve of his jacket and wrapped the leather around his forearm, tying it into place with some of the string. When he had it properly set and tied, he found where he would need to cut it for the proper length and width. Marking it with a pencil, he then untied the leather and set it down. Using a kunai, because he wanted to conserve chakra, he cut the leather so it would reach from just after his wrist, almost all the way to his elbow. Naruto continued to work and was half finished when Sakura and Sasuke arrived. They had come just in time and had expected to see Kakashi already there, but he was not. Instead they saw Naruto doing something under a tree. They both walked over towards him, curious to see what he was doing and if he knew where their instructor was. Naruto was working on putting in a layer of thinner, softer leather on the inside of the bracers so they would be comfortable, when two shadows fall across his lap. He looked up to see Sasuke, with Sakura just behind him. "Hey, where's our teacher?" The inflection on the R made it perfectly clear that in his opinion, it was only for him. Naruto frowned and looked around the training area. "Not here?" Naruto shrugged. "Could you please move a little, you're in my light?" Naruto didn't want any trouble this early. He just wanted to finish the bracers in peace. Sasuke was angry. How dare the dead last talk to him like that? He scowled down at Naruto, who had gone back to attaching the inner layer, before turning and walking away. He had not eaten today because he would do whatever the teacher said for him to pass and get stronger. Sakura looked at Naruto, curious about what he was doing, but then at Sasuke, who was walking away, and she followed him. She had had a little to eat, seeing the logic in what Naruto had said, but she felt guilty for going Kakashi's advice and didn't eat much. Naruto continued to work, using small chakra burns to attach the two pieces of leather. When it was done, he remolded the bracers to his arms. Once they were to size, he got out several buckles from his bag, ones that he'd gotten from Kibo earlier that year but had never managed to use until now. He had attached them and was working on putting holes in the straps when Kakashi arrived. He was alerted by an aggravated shout from Sakura. "You're late." Sakura was angry and hungry, and Sasuke had refused to talk with her after Naruto had brushed him off. "I'm sorry, there was a little old lady." Kakashi trailed off under the glare of Sakura. "Liar!" Sakura shouted. Naruto sighed and went back to finishing the bracers. He had just a little more to do. Kakashi looked around and saw that Sasuke was angry that he was late as well, but had not said anything. He spied Naruto under the tree and saw him working on the bracers. How had he learned to make them? A book? Possibly, but Naruto was doing it now without any reference to aid him. He would look into that later. Kakashi walked over to the middle log and set an alarm clock down on top of it. He hid it and turned to his students. "You three have until noon to get these 2 bells from me." He held up 2 silver bells on strings. If you can get the bells from me, you pass. Ready? He looked at Sasuke, who had tensed up ready to go, and to Sakura, already planning, and then to Naruto, who seemed completely oblivious. He sighed and looked at the two ready students. Go. And with that, the three of them disappeared. Naruto smiled to himself as he attached the one of the buckles. Only 3 more to go. Little did the others know, but he had sent a clone to watch while he finished the bracers. Kakashi wondered if Naruto had even heard a word he had said, but didn't have time to wonder for long, as several shuriken flew out from behind a bush directly at him. He ducked them and reached into his bag, taking out a single object. Sakura watched in confusion as Kakashi pulled out a book and started to read. And what was Naruto doing? He was still under the tree attaching another buckle. She saw a flash of orange and looked, but there was nothing there. She turned back to see Kakashi catching a kunai on his finger, then turning the page, giggling to himself. This was going to be an odd day. Sasuke, on the other hand, was setting traps and watching Kakashi. When he was ready, he jumped out and threw several kunai at the teacher. Kakashi sidestepped them easily, but one of the kunai cut a wire and threw a collection of kunai and shuriken at the ninja. Kakashi dodged those as well, realizing too late that he had been maneuvered so that the projectiles he had just dodged were heading straight for Naruto at high speed. He was about to rush and stop them when Sasuke attacked, distracting him. The clone jumped down and caught the kunai and shuriken. Using the fluid movements of the water style, each of the projectiles were thrown back at the fighting duo. Naruto smiled as he attached the last buckle. He then rolled up his sleeves and put them on. Kakashi was smiling. This boy was good. He couldn't even read his book with the Uchiha attacking him. He hadn't heard the sounds of Sasuke's previous attack harming Naruto, so he assumed the blonde was alright. He was surprised when suddenly the same shuriken and kunai he had just dodged came at him again. He and Sasuke jumped apart to dodge the oncoming barrage. How? There were no strings that he could see. He saw Naruto standing up now, rolling his sleeves down. Had he done this? He was so distracted that he almost missed Sakura rushing in, trying to grab one of the bells. Sakura had seen an opening. Kakashi was having a handful with Sasuke on his own, and when the attack came back from what she could only call the other Naruto, he had left an opening. She rushed, but she wasn't as fast as the boys and completely missed as Kakashi jumped up into a tree. Naruto felt that now was a proper time to enter the battle. He released the clone that disappeared in a puff of smoke and charged in and attacked using the basic style that they taught at the academy. He wasn't very good at it because he had mostly focused on the other styles. So while Sasuke distracted him with his attacks, Naruto tried to slip in and get the bells. Kakashi was not impressed with Naruto's performance so far. The attacks were sloppy and his form was bad. But then, what had happened before? It was because of this that he was completely caught off guard by Sasuke performing hand seals. Kakashi recognized the attack and jumped out of the way of the great fireball, only to find Naruto in front of him standing in a different stance than before, one that he didn't recognize. Lightning style, Naruto said with a smile as he attacked, using 2 kunai instead of gathering chakra into his fingertips. He didn't want to give everything away. He attacked very quickly, far faster than before, and this time his movements weren't forced like they were before. But Naruto wasn't going for the bells, he was attacking directly, targeting specific points with the kunai. Kakashi dodged for blocked his attacks, so surprised at the sudden change that he almost missed when Sasuke joined in, also attacking directly. But for him, they were still slow and he managed to dodge or block every one of the attacks made by both the boys. It was when the boys both did spinning kicks towards Kakashi's head that the last member of Team 7 attacked. Sakura saw Kakashi raise his hands to block both the spinning kicks and saw the opening that had been created. She threw a kunai as she ran forward at full speed. The kunai struck true and both the strings of the bells were cut. Sakura dove forward to grab them as they fell. The alarm went off just as Kakashi's foot came up and caught the bells midair. Sakura slid right under his foot, unable to catch the bells that were now between his toes. Sasuke and Naruto both jumped back from Kakashi when they heard the alarm and were disappointed to see that Kakashi still had the bells, whereas Sakura was sprawled out in the dirt. "We failed, didn't we?" Naruto asked as he dusted himself off. Sakura got up, feeling terrible. She felt that she had failed Sasuke. If she had gotten the bells, she would have given him one so they could both pass and stay together. Sasuke, on the other hand, was pissed. He couldn't fail, he's the number one in their class. In his mind, this was all Naruto's fault. If the blonde hadn't barged in, he would have been able to get the bells on his own. Now, instead of him passing like he should have, he's going to get failed and sent back along with the dead last. That was unacceptable. Sasuke started running through hand seals again, but Naruto stopped him. Don't, you'll just waste chakra. Naruto turned to Kakashi. Let us have one more chance. This time we'll work as a team instead of alone. But then only two of us will pass, and not the other. Sakura pointed out as she dusted herself off. Wrong. Kakashi shook his head. The point of the exercise was for you all to work as a team. Only then would you have been able to get the bells from me. Didn't you see when Sasuke and Naruto attacked together, it left an opening for you, Sakura. There are 2 packets of food over by the bridge, divide it up among the 3 of you. You have a half hour, and then you had better come after me with everything you have to get the bells away from me. And with that he disappeared in a puff of smoke, leaving the 3 alone. The students walked over to the bridge and there were indeed 2 food packets waiting for them. They each looked at the others wondering how they were going to divide them. You 2 have them, I already ate this morning, a little more time won't cost me anything. Naruto turned and walked back over to the stumps, mulling over what he was going to do. Take the weights off, he won't be expecting that. Use the other 2 as distractions. Have the girl attack at distance with kunai and shuriken. The other boy should attack him with his taijutsu. That should leave enough of an opening for you to get in and steal the bells, Kyuubi said from inside Naruto's mind. Naruto smiled as he performed the necessary hand seals and tapped first his jacket and then pants, his back to Sakura and Sasuke so they couldn't see what he was doing. He then removed his jacket, folded it up and put it down under a tree, leaving him in a white t-shirt. His necklace was now visible, but he didn't really care so long as they didn't know what it did. He looked at his forearm bracer and decided that while the other 2 were eating the food packets hungrily, he placed his own pattern on the blank leather. He removed the first one as he sat down and laid it against his leg. Gathering chakra into his finger, he began to work, embossing the leather. Sakura watched Naruto as she ate. This one couldn't be the dead last that had been in class with her for the past 2 years. She saw him fight. He was on par with Sasuke, once he had changed to that unfamiliar style anyway. He was smart too, not that she had ever really heard him speak much before. He had always been rather quiet in class. What had happened to him to make him like this? She decided that at first chance she would try and figure out Uzumaki Naruto. Sasuke was fuming silently as he ate the food, glaring at Naruto. He didn't like Naruto before, and he didn't like him anymore now. Stopping him from trying to get the bells when the Junin's guard was down, was he trying to keep Sasuke from passing? This wasn't the dead last that he remembered. What had changed? And what was he doing now? It looked like he was just running his finger over those bracers, but there was heat rising off. That made no sense. Why would he be burning something he just made? Sasuke brushed it off. Naruto wasn't important, getting the bells was. Regretfully, it appeared that he would need the assistance of the girl, and yes, even the dead last. When they finished eating, they walked over to Naruto who was putting the bracers back on. What they saw when they got back was the embossing Naruto had done to it. It wasn't complex, just an outline really, of a fox's head, one on each bracer, each mirroring the other. Sakura had to admit they did look pretty cool. She looked at Sasuke and wondered if he could do anything like that. Sasuke, on the other hand, completely ignored the bracers. We do need a plan, and obviously a head-on attack won't work, Sakura said. We need 2 people to distract him and 1 person to go for the bells. It would have worked last time, except that we weren't working together. Both Naruto and Sasuke nodded in agreement. We shouldn't have 2 people facing him in taijutsu, either, Naruto said, gaining puzzled looks from his teammates. Look, we're both good, but our styles conflict, and we were getting into each other's way. Someone should attack up close, another from distance and the last should go for the bells. Sakura frowned. Who is going to take what part? She was not as good at fighting as Sasuke or Naruto, but her speed wasn't enough to get the bells either. Naruto flashed a grin. Sasuke should attack him in taijutsu, he's better than me. This was not true. With his styles Naruto was better, but not by much, and he didn't want to give the styles away yet. And Sakura has better aim than me with kunai and shuriken, so she should take distance. Again, not quite true. He had often made the kunai strike the practice log at the academy backwards, to practice disarming an opponent from a distance without actually harming them. But what mattered was that his two teammates believed it was true. So that means that I'm going in to get the kunai, and without my jacket I'll be a lot faster. What does your jacket have to do with how fast you are? Sasuke asked, sounding a little irritated. Okay, you want to know? My jacket is weighted. I'm a lot faster without it on than I am with it on. They looked over at his jacket lying under a tree, and then back at Naruto. Sakura had to admit that without his jacket on she could tell that he was in quite good shape, though in her mind Sasuke was always in the best shape and no one could compare. Naruto looked at them both. Does that sound good? He was growing impatient. Sakura nodded, she was all for it. Sasuke frowned but nodded once. Good, then let's get into position. And with that they broke, and all together went to find Kakashi. Kakashi was leaning against a tree reading his book and letting out little giggles, blushing as well. The three separated, taking up positions to better assist the plan. Sakura went up into the trees. Sasuke got as close as he dared and still kept hidden. Naruto found some cover to watch from, until he found the right time to strike. Sasuke started the attack, rushing in on his own, throwing kunai until he got close enough to engage the teacher in taijutsu. Sakura followed by throwing many shuriken in arching pathways towards Kakashi. Together, they managed to maneuver him out onto a path through the woods. Naruto took up a runner's starting stance a little way along the path, and when Kakashi was in his range, he thrust off the ground with all his might, racing forward to Kakashi and the bells. Kakashi had realized already what they were doing. A complex team move from beginners, this was going to be interesting for sure. He was surprised when Naruto seemingly came out of nowhere and raced along the path towards him. He had never seen a genin move so fast before. There was no way he could be running that fast and still be in control of himself. Kakashi readied himself for a double attack from the two boys again, but it didn't come. The Naruto passed right by him. What, a distraction? Kakashi shifted and felt the slight weight of the two bells on his belt loop, but Sasuke and Sakura had stopped their attack. In the distance, the alarm could be heard going off. Looks like you all failed to get the bells, Kakashi sighed. It appeared that they didn't have what it took to work together. Just then, there were two dingles behind him. He reached down to his belt loop and found, not the bells, but two acorns where the bells should have been, attached with a different string. He turned to see Naruto sitting on a log, holding up both bells, grinning at the teacher. Or you could have them already. He pulled the two acorns off his belt and inadvertently ripped one end of the belt loop off. Damn it, looks like I'll need to repair these when I get home. He looked at the genin who were in turn watching him, Naruto juggling the bells in one hand grinning happily. Alright, you three pass. Show up here tomorrow for your first mission, Kakashi smiled at them. He looked at the genin who were in turn watching him, Naruto juggling the bells in one hand, grinning happily. You are officially Team 7. I look forward to what is to be sure quite an interesting adventure with you three. His eye looked over each of them in turn. Bye. And he was gone in a puff of smoke. Sasuke turned and headed off the field without a word. Naruto stretched his arms and yawned a little to himself. Sakura looked at Naruto and then Sasuke. Part of her wanted to chase after her heartthrob, but another part of her was wondering what Naruto was going to do. Oi! Both Sakura and Sasuke turned to Naruto, who had put his jacket back. You two want to go get something to eat? He smiled at them happily. They were a team. Why shouldn't they get to know each other over a meal? Pa, I have better things to do than waste time with something like that. Sasuke scoffed and turned, heading back home, supposedly. Sakura looked at Naruto apologetically. Maybe some other time. She turned away and ran after Sasuke, who just ignored her. I thought we were supposed to be a team. Naruto mumbled to himself. You three have a way to go before you become an actual team, Kyuubi said from inside his head. That boy, there's something up with him, not yet sure what. Maybe it has something to do with that person to kill, or whatever. Anyway, put the weight back on and go get something to eat. I'm preparing something for you, but it will have to wait until tonight. What is it, Kyuubi-sensei? Naruto thought so that only the demon could hear him. "You'll see, kid, just go get something to eat." Kyuubi chuckled a little and retreated away from contact, working on whatever it was. Naruto preformed the necessary seals and tapped his jacket and pants, instantly increasing their weight again. He walked off into town, wondering what the great spirit inside him had planned for him tonight. A little while later, Naruto found a little shop that looked on the verge of closing down permanently. He walked in under the sign of Ichiraku Ramen, and found his own little rundown paradise. Naruto spent the next hour happily sampling the different ramen that they had to offer. Luckily, he had been saving up and could pay for it all at the end. With the amount of money that he shelled out to them, the old man and his daughter could stay open for a few more days, and they would, if he promised to come back again, something he did without hesitation. Naruto walked back to his little apartment, smiling to himself. The old man had been reluctant to sell to him at first, but when he showed that he did indeed have the money to pay, he had been served his first ramen, and then his second, and third. And with each passing bowl the man had come to smile at Naruto and then talk with him, until they were having a happy little conversation between Naruto's mouthfuls of the noodles. Naruto finally got an order from Kyuubi that he was ready and it was time to go home. Naruto paid for the ramen and bowed to both the old man and his daughter, who both smiled at him. He then left the shop and then he walked home. He walked into his home, closing and locking the door behind him before walking into the middle of the room and sitting down in a meditative position. Naruto closed his eyes and let his mind withdraw into himself. When he opened his eyes again and looked at his surroundings, he smiled at the change. Whereas before it had been dirty and smelly, now his room was clean with the faint smell of cloths, like the back room of the Wonderland clothing store. It made him feel comfortable. He walked through the passages until he came to the cage that held the great demon spirit inside him. It had been several months since Naruto had found that he could change the appearance of the areas on either side of the cage, if not the cage itself. It was for that reason that the other side of the bars appeared as Kyuubi had requested, a large barren wasteland of dried cracked earth. Kyuubi could be seen sitting up and watching the gateway for Naruto. When he arrived, the fox stood up and walked over, kneeling down so he could look at Naruto through the gateway. "Alright sensei, what have you been planning?" Naruto sat down in a chair that he formed from his thoughts. "That guy with the silver hair, the teacher, he was going easy on you." Naruto was not surprised by this. After all, the man wasn't a Junin for nothing. If it was a real battle, you and those other two would have been dead before you could take 3 steps. Naruto nodded a little. He knew he was good after all that training, but there was only so far he could go in 2 years. From what Kito had told him the last time, he was probably only upper-level Genin or lower Chunin. But when he perfected the element styles, and with the chakra control and techniques that Kyuubi was teaching him, there was no doubt that he could make Junin level in another couple of years. "So what are you going to do?" Naruto looked up at the fox, curiosity brushing the other thoughts from his mind. "What I'm going to do is change your body. Specifically your senses, but there will be some other things as well." Naruto knew that his senses were weak in comparison to the demon in front of him, but he wondered how the fox was going to change him. Kyuubi smiled as he recognized the look that Naruto was giving him, curiosity with not a little apprehension. "You may as well know, this is going to sting a bit, and your senses will be wild until you learn to control them. And not just your normal human senses, but I'll be giving you some of my own senses as well." Naruto bit his lip at the mention of pain, but he knew that whatever gifts came along with the pain would greatly outweigh a little time's discomfort. So he looked up and met the gold and red eyes of the fox. "Alright, I'm ready." "Good," the spirit nodded. "Form a cup or bowl on your side, and follow my directions without question." Kyuubi closed his eyes and concentrated. Naruto got the distinct feeling of seals being made and chakra being channeled as he held out his hands and formed a good-sized bowl in his hands, wondering what it was for. It was then that Kyuubi's eyes opened wide, glowing red, focused on Naruto and the bowl that had been formed. Naruto was not expecting what happened next. Kyuubi spat directly into the bowl, accurately filling it to the rim. The liquid bubbled and swirled of its own accord. It was not clear, but deep red, and glowing, reminding him of flowing lava. "Drink it right now. I'd rather not bite my tongue again. Be sure not to miss a drop," the demon commanded him. Naruto hesitated only for an instant before bringing the bowl to his lips and drinking the blood. He felt it burning down his throat, setting his insides on fire, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop, not with those great glowing eyes still directed at him. When the bowl was empty, it fell from his hands and he collapsed to the floor, clutching at his belly as the fire spread outward and filled his entire body. His eyes clenched shut, his teeth grinding together. He missed the changes that were happening to him. Kyuubi watched with interest as Naruto's hair turned red for an instant, and red fur sprouted down over his face and the rest of his body. His features became more fox-like, his ears got longer, teeth sharper. When his eyes opened for an instant, they were the same red and gold that looked down at him. Claws formed on his hands as the fur reached it. Most surprisingly, a red tail lashed out from between his pants and jacket, definitely a fox's tail. But then as it had come it went as well. The hair turned back to that striking blonde and the fur on his face receded. Along the rest of his body, the claws on his hands retreated and the fangs shrunk away. The tail was the last change to disappear. The fox was amused to see that Naruto's ears almost returned to normal, but they remained just a little pointed at the tops. As the last of the features disappeared, Naruto slumped, breathing hard. The pain ebbed away, leaving him as he was before. Well, almost as he was before. Sting a bit? Naruto yelled at the fox as soon as he got his voice back. He glared up at the great beast with his, once again, sky-blue eyes. I thought I was on fire. This had better be worth all that. Naruto paused and sat back, not bothering with the chair this time, then looked up at Kyuubi. What was that anyway? I mean, it wasn't blood, right? You don't have a real body here. Half right. Kyuubi settled down, his eyes no longer glowing. I've told you before, in this place we are only spirit and energy. I don't have blood, but then what did you just drink? What it was is a little bit of my essence. Because of the seal, you would have gotten it eventually, I just sped up the process a little. Does that mean you're going to disappear? Because you gave me part of yourself? Emotions ran fleeting over Naruto's face. But what he got was a barking laugh. Huh, that little bit? No, I'll be with you till the end of your days, kid. At the rate that I was being absorbed by the seal and put into you, you would have to live several hundred years. Kyuubi paused for a moment to think. Come to think of it, because of your body absorbing me, you might actually live that long. But that's a long way away. Naruto was shocked. He had never thought about living hundreds of years, and in truth, would rather not at the moment. But anyway, you now have demon essence running through you, and not just when you call on my energy. This means several things. 1. You will be able to draw on more of my power with fewer ill effects. 2. You will be able to use more than just the human techniques that I've been teaching you. 3. You will be able to activate demon seals and artifacts that you may find. There are several floating around the human world. I'll show you where I've hidden 1 or 2 when you're ready. And finally, you will be able to transform to some degree. That ability will increase as you absorb more of my essence. Transform? Into what? Naruto asked, both fear and excitement audible in his voice. A demon fox. Don't worry, you'll still be you no matter what form you're in. And as of right now, you can only transform into a furry-looking human, really, with a tail. The fox yawned. We will talk about that some other time, but for now get up and walk around your apartment, get used to your new senses. When you sleep, I will instruct you on how to transform and use the additional demon senses that you have. Now go away, I want to take a nap. He turned away and walked out over the barren fields. Naruto closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he was back in his apartment, lying on his back, covered in now cold sweat and a fading headache. Naruto was almost flooded by the intensity of, well, everything. He could feel every ounce of the weights on his shoulders, the smallest breeze from the crack under the window. The buzz of a fly sounded like a swarm of bees. Though it was well after sunset and he had not turned on the lights, he could see perfectly, beyond perfectly. He could read the title of a discarded scroll in a dark corner as if it was in his hands. He could smell the sweat on his body, as well as several other distinct scents. Naruto closed his eyes and tried focusing on a single smell. He found himself thinking of Kibo. Another scent reminded him of Kito. He found that he could pick out the aroma of just about anyone he had met in the past few days, including Sakura, Sasuke, and all of Team 8. Both the teachers, Kurenai and Kakashi, were harder to identify, though. He tried focusing on other things. He could smell the ramen droplets on his shirt as if there was a steaming bowl in front of him, The taste of every flavor at the same time almost overwhelmed him. Naruto realized that he was very tired when he tried to stand up and almost fell over. He made his way to his bed and lay down, not bothering to get under the covers. The bed creaked in protest at the added weight. He gritted his teeth against the sound but relaxed as it stopped. Naruto closed his eyes and tried to go to sleep, but the assault on his senses kept him awake for a long while until exhaustion finally claimed him. As Naruto slept, Kyuubi instructed him on how to control the intensity of each of his normal senses, as well as the few demon senses he had been given. Some of the demon senses were harder to get used to. He could sense the spirits of other living things, from trees and grass to animals and birds. He could even sense other ninja. It was especially useful against ninja because very few knew how to hide their spirits like they could hide their chakra, something else Naruto could sense. Naruto was really surprised when Kyuubi told him he could see auras if he focused chakra into his eyes. Kyuubi was unsure if it would work, but he instructed Naruto to try to focus on an animal, to see if he could understand what they were trying to say. As things were right then, each of the demon senses would drain chakra from him, but as he used them more and got used to them, they would drain less and do more. Also, he would not need to focus on them so much to keep them active. Another effect was that whenever he drew on one of Kyuubi's senses, he would change a little of himself until he had learned to control the senses completely. His eyes would turn red if he looked for the auras of others. His ears would change to look more like the foxes if he tried to understand the languages of the animals, and his hair would turn red if he tried to sense the spirits. As for transformation, Naruto would have to focus on fully transforming his body. When he did that, each of the demon's senses would come into full action, slowly draining his chakra. But while he was transformed he would be faster, stronger, and more agile. Kyuubi also warned that if he got angry he may start to change involuntarily, so it was best if he kept control of his emotions. By the time they were done, it was almost morning and time for Naruto to wake up. Time passed. Naruto was bored and Kyuubi was frustrated because Naruto was bored. Sasuke was agitated as well. Only Sakura and Kakashi didn't seem to be affected. What was the reason for all of this? 2 words: yard work. It was the 6th D-rank mission they had taken, weed Mr. Sono's garden. Naruto hadn't been expecting anything big, but this was lower than he had expected by far. Their first mission had been to deliver some scrolls across the village. They took it very seriously until they found out the scrolls were only cooking recipes. The second was to walk a large set of dogs around Konoha. In truth, it was more like the dogs dragged all 3 of the genin around the village. The third had been to help a librarian reorganize the books. Naruto enjoyed the feeling of being back in the library, as it had been one of the places he used to hang out in before he had been kicked out of the orphanage. So far the worst task had been the 4th, babysitting a set of 5-year-old triplet boys. They were nightmares, each of them. None of the 3 genin could keep up with them. They didn't seem to need words to know what the others were thinking. At first it was little things, like confusing Sakura by switching names and getting upset when Sakura couldn't get them straight. Then they moved on to Sasuke, pushing him to the limits by asking him inane questions without end, such as, why? When they finally moved on to Naruto, he thought he was prepared for them. He was wrong. He should have known that tag was probably not the best idea when they looked at each other and smiled before running away from him while he counted to 20. When he started looking for them, he could have sworn they were ninja by how well they hid themselves. Then one would pop up from behind a desk suddenly and disappear just as quickly when he jumped after. By the end of that mission, Sakura was on the verge of ripping her hair out. Sasuke had a twitch in his left eye and would reach for his kunai holster if he heard the question, why? And Naruto was exhausted and ready to swear that there were 6 of them, instead of 3. Kakashi just chuckled and wished luck to the one that had to teach them when they became ninja. The mere thought caused the others to shudder. By contrast, the 5th mission was a walk in the park. Literally, they had to deliver some tools from a woodworking shop to another. Along the way they walked through one of the most beautiful parks in Konoha. It was a beautiful day and they all enjoyed it. So here they were now, weeding Mr. Sono's garden. But Kyuubi was tired of having Naruto doing such menial tasks and Naruto was eager to agree. Gods and demons, kid, you're making slower progress now than you did when you were in the academy, The demon chided Naruto as he pulled up a dandelion and threw it into the pile. Next time you go to get a mission, try and get a better one than just one of these stupid weeding jobs again. Naruto nodded and kept working. It was a hot day and all three of the genin were sweating. It was too hot for them to even talk with each other, so they continued to work in silence except for the occasional mumbled threat against weeds or grumbles about how much longer it was going to take. It was not quite true what Kyuubi said. Naruto and the others were improving quite quickly, but only in certain areas. The main thing that Kakashi focused on was teamwork. When they didn't have a mission, he would take them to their training grounds and give them a task to accomplish, like taking the bells from him, or keeping him away from the bells. Naruto was still training hard with the demon on different techniques and he spent time every night working on the stances for the element styles. But it was also true that on the skills that Kyuubi focused, he was not improving as quickly as he had before. Naruto kept adding weight to his jacket. Once a week, he would increase the amount by one more step. Currently, the combined weight was around 300 pounds, causing him to expend chakra to keep from showing how much weight he was carrying around. The constant use of chakra tired him, but made him stronger. Naruto brought it up when the three met at the bridge. "I am so tired of these stupid missions," Naruto said as he lay down under a tree. The other two joined him. Sasuke did so more to get out of the sun than anything else. He still disliked working with the two, but he didn't show it as much as he had before. Sakura sat down close to Sasuke. She would have sat with him anyway, but it was nice to get out of the sun. "But what can we do? We're just genin," Sakura said. Of the three, she was the most resigned to the small-time missions. Though she didn't show it, her inner mind was screaming to get out and get away from the petty missions. Sasuke just snorted. He hated the missions. He had to train, that was the only way to get stronger, and these small-time missions were doing nothing for him. "I say that today, when we see the Hokage, we demand a better mission." Naruto looked at the other two to see their reactions. Sasuke perked up for a moment at the thought of a higher-ranked mission. Sakura looked torn. She knew she wasn't strong, and her fighting skills were far below those of her teammates, but when she looked at Sasuke she knew he would protect her, and so if he wanted a tougher mission, she would want one too. They both looked at Naruto and nodded. "Alright, here's what we do," and the three of them leaned in, planning on how to get the Hokage to give them a better mission. Deep inside Naruto, the Kyuubi grinned. With any luck they would get a mission out of Konoha and then he would be able to get Naruto to practice more with his demon senses, something they had been severely lacking in. Kakashi arrived last, as usual. As he took the three genin up to the Hokage's office he noted the difference. They acted as though they were planning something. The Hokage was sitting behind his desk as usual when they arrived. Today, Iruka was with him, handing out the mission assignments. As their next set of duties were being read off, Naruto looked at the other two and rolled his eyes. "Oh come on," Naruto complained. He usually wasn't loud, but he felt it was necessary in these circumstances to get what he wanted. "All we've been doing is these stupid little things. Why can't we get something bigger? We're ready for it." The other two genin nodded in agreement. Kakashi just groaned to himself. He was going to get in trouble for this, he just knew it. "You idiot," Iruka yelled at Naruto. He was not pleased with the outburst, especially when it was his turn to be working with the Hokage. "You're just genin, and even with Sakura and Sasuke, you aren't ready to take on even a C-class mission." Though he probably didn't mean it this time, that comment really got under Naruto's skin. "You think I'm useless, is that it?" He spoke softly, but with an edge on it that reminded some of the ring of steel as it slid out of a sheath. When he looked up at Iruka, his eyes burned with cold contained anger. "I am not useless, and I could prove it if you gave me a chance." This action startled Sakura and Sasuke. It wasn't in the plan at all, and they had never heard Naruto speak like that before. It shook them deeply. Kakashi was tensed and ready to step in if something happened, when a little laugh from the Hokage completely broke the mood. "Alright," he chuckled from under his large hat. "You others agree with him that you think you are ready?" Naruto just stared at him as Sasuke and Sakura nodded in turn. "Then you'll get your C-class mission. Your mission is to protect a Mr. Tazuna on his trip back to the Wave Country. From there you will protect him until the completion of the bridge before returning." "But sir," Iruka interrupted. "They're just genin. Everyone deserves a chance." "Iruka, remember that." The old man smiled around his pipe. Naruto smiled back at the Hokage. He was getting not only a better mission, but a mission outside of Konoha. Now show in Mr. Tazuna, so they may meet the one they're going to be looking after. Iruka nodded his assent, finally giving up the point as he got up and went to the door. Opening it, he ushered in a man in his late 50s holding a bag on his back and a bottle of sake in his hand. "These shrimps are supposed to protect me?" he asked, his voice only slightly slurred by the sake that he had drunk. "They look like a bunch of brats to me, especially the short one." Naruto frowned at the man. Already he didn't like him. He was supposed to spend time protecting him? This was going to be a long mission. The fact that Sakura giggled at his comment about the short one was not helping at all. Naruto knew he was short. "Many surprises come from the least expected source," Naruto said. The man stopped the bottle halfway to his lips and looked at Naruto, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Huh, I like you, kid, that was a good one. I was half expecting you to fly off the handle." He laughed and turned to look at the Hokage and then Kakashi. "Well, when do we leave?" Kakashi turned to the genin. "You have 20 minutes to get packed for a 4-day trip. Don't take anything you don't absolutely need. Meet at the east gate with your bags ready." "Yes, sensei," they chorused before running out. Naruto ran back to his little apartment, grabbed his stuff, and shoved it into a backpack. Grabbing all his kunai, shuriken and senbon needles, he packed some into the bag and put the rest into his secret pockets in the jacket and pants. "Relax, kid, you're not going to war here. This is just a guard mission. And you're going to spend it training," but Kyuubi laughed. "Pack half of your shuriken and kunai, don't worry about the needles. Besides, you aren't as good with them as you are with the others. Don't bring any medical stuff, either. I can heal any injury you sustain." Naruto nodded and took the demon's advice, packing only as instructed. A change of clothes, along with the weapons, went into his bag. He also brought the forearm bracers and, at Kyuubi's instruction, a pair of sunglasses and a bandana. "I'll explain later, kid, when you need them." With everything packed, Naruto ran to the east gate. The others were already there. "Sorry I'm late," he apologized. "My apartment isn't that close to this gate." "You're not late, you're actually right on time," Kakashi said, as he stood off to the side with Tazuna. "Well, time to go." And with that they all started walking east, towards the coast where Wave Country was located. As they walked, Kakashi explained to them a little about the other ninja countries. Many countries have hidden villages, so they aren't reliant on the 5 great shinobi countries. Examples of this are Hidden Waterfall and Hidden Grass. Wave Country currently doesn't have the infrastructure to bring in the things necessary to make and sustain a hidden village. So, these other hidden villages, do they have cage? I mean, is there Kusakage in Grass, or a Takikage in Waterfall? Sakura piped up, curiosity getting the better of her shy nature. Nope, only the 5 great shinobi countries have cage to lead them. The villages just have an elder or powerful ninja to lead them, but they do not have the title of cage. To get the title, they would have to be recognized by the other great countries, and there are some standards and things that are too boring to get into. Naruto was walking ahead of the others. It was a bright day, so when he put on the sunglasses nobody thought to question him about it. He started to focus chakra into his eyes as Kyuubi instructed him. At first, nothing happened, but then differences started to appear. The trees became greener, they seemed to blur, as if the outline was solid, but the colors started to bleed, mixing and interacting with the colors surrounding them. It wasn't just the trees but every living thing. A bird stood out in the tree as a vibrant ruby as it sang. Naruto had to restrain himself from trying to understand the song. If his ears changed, it would be a dead giveaway as to the change that had come over him. Overall, the feeling from his surroundings, from the trees, was contentment. There was plenty of sunlight and water under the ground for them. The soil was fertile and they had all they could need. He glanced back at his teammates and teacher. Sakura's aura was pink with a tinge of blue that only spread a little way from her body, not as free as the tree's auras. As she glanced over at Sasuke, the intensity of the pink increased while the blue almost disappeared. Sakura blushed and looked away, and slowly the colors returned to as they had been. "The different colors represent the different emotions," Kyuubi said. "Depending on the intensity and color, you can see how a person feels and how strongly. This is the first level of the demon eyes. The pink of the girl is her affection for the other boy, the blue is her confidence. When she looks at the boy, Her affection grows but her confidence disappears to almost nothing. For now, use the colors to identify emotions, but by the end of this trip, you should be able to work without the colors and know instinctively what a person's aura is. Naruto nodded and turned to look at his other teammate. Sasuke shocked him. There were no bright colors, only very dark ones. Black, dark blue, and dark green surrounded him. Black was the greatest color, blue the second, and the dark green last. As Naruto looked more, there seemed to be another color, covering the others. It reminded him of the shifting colors that one sees when looking at oil. Black is anger and hatred, undirected and wild, the most dangerous kind. That boy has a lot of it. I wonder what could have made him that way. Kyuubi sounded a bit intrigued but moved on to the next color nonetheless. Blue, as I said before, is confidence. As you know, he is very confident in his abilities and strength. Green is envy. This is a curious boy. He seems to have everything, and yet he is full of anger and envy. Just one more thing, that shimmer around him, that is the aura of madness. This boy is not the most stable of people mentally. Be careful of him in future if you see that aura increase. What are you looking at? Sasuke snapped at Naruto. He had apparently noticed him looking and was not pleased. Naruto just smiled and turned around. He would look at Kakashi later if he could. Naruto kept his demon eyes activated as they kept walking. It was then that he noticed the puddle. It was about 20 feet ahead of them and it shimmered blue, with some of that aura of madness. There was a new color as well, a shimmering purple. And when Naruto looked closer he saw that it was not just one, but two auras. Killing intent, that is the purple color. Be careful, those are human auras. Someone is hiding there, and laying in ambush. You most likely will be attacked, be on guard. They walked past the puddle without event. It wasn't until after they had walked past the puddle that they were attacked. So quiet that not even Kakashi seemed to notice a figure rise from the puddle, another person on his back. They both had metal gauntlets on their arms. One had it on his left hand while the other had it on his right. Oddly, the gauntlets were connected by a long spiked chain. Naruto whirled around at the sound of metal rattling. He grabbed a set of kunai out of his holster and got them ready, but it was too late. Kakashi was wrapped fully in the chains. One down, said the one with the gauntlet on his left hand. Both figures yanked on the chain and it shredded through the figure of Kakashi. Next, both figures appeared on either side of Naruto. Two down, said the other. But it was not true. Sasuke jumped into the air. He threw a shuriken and pinned the chain to a tree, then a kunai through the hole in the shuriken so that the chain could not be removed. The nin tried to pull free but could not. As Sasuke came down, Naruto spun chakra around the kunai in his hands as Kibo taught him and stabbed both the attackers in the elbow of their arms that had the gauntlets. The point that he aimed for was one that Kito had taught him with her lightning style. He managed to completely immobilize their arms while the chakra cauterized the wounds so they wouldn't bleed to death. Sasuke came down, grabbed the gauntlets, one in each hand, and turned. Then he kicked his feet out behind him and kicked the attackers in the face. It was at this point that the chains broke away from the gauntlets. The two were phased for a moment by the kicks, but it wasn't enough to stop them. One attacked Naruto while the other rushed at Sakura and Tazuna. Naruto only had a moment to bring his arms up. With his good arm, the attacker spun a kunai out of the pouch on his leg, seeming to ignore his inability to feel anything below the elbow of his other arm other than burning pain. Naruto felt the sting of his attacker's kunai across the back of his hand before there was a black blur and the attack on him stopped. Sasuke landed and saw one of the ninja launching himself at Sakura and Tazuna. He wasted no time in putting himself between the attacker and his apparent target, the bridge builder. But nothing happened. In a blur of black, Kakashi appeared. Under each of his arms was one of the disabled ninja. What they had thought was Kakashi before was instead wooden logs that had only appeared to be him. Kakashi wasted no time in tying both of the attackers to a nearby tree. It seems that we have several problems currently. These are missed Chunin. From what I saw, their target was Mr. Tazuna. Now through the mission grade selection process, the worst that can be expected for a C-class mission is occasional bandits. Only in A or B-class missions are the enemies expected to be other ninja. Kakashi-sensei, Sakura said in a pleading tone. We aren't ready to fight other shinobi. But we already accepted the mission. But that leads to another problem. Naruto has been injured, and the kunai used against him was most likely poisoned. The others turned to look at Naruto and at his cut hand. Naruto looked down at his hand where the cut was. It was not healing and already he could feel a burning sensation eating its way up his arm. Thankfully, Kito had insisted on teaching him at least a little first aid. With the others watching, he pulled off his jacket and grabbed the bandana from his bag, quickly using it to tie a tourniquet around his upper arm. "Naruto, what are you doing?" Sakura asked him. The sight of blood still dripping from his hand was making her a little sick. "I'm going to draw out the poison. I refuse to be the weakness that makes this mission turn back." He twirled a kunai in his other hand and brought it down, cutting it diagonally across the back of his cut hand, gritting his teeth against the pain. Soon the burning sensation lessened and completely died away. "That's all very good, Naruto, and you did the right things, but that cut is too big and too deep. If it isn't treated properly, you could bleed to death." Naruto wished he could hit the man, but he was right. The cut was too deep, and for a normal person that could have meant a long, slow death of blood loss. Naruto was not a normal person. Without saying anything, Naruto reached up with his good hand and untied the bandana from his upper arm. He started to tie it around his hand to stop the blood loss. "Naruto, that." Kakashi's voice trailed off as he reached out to stop Naruto. But what he saw made him pause. The cut that Naruto had made was already healing. By the look of it, there wouldn't even be a scar. Kakashi looked up to find Naruto staring at him, challenging him to say anything. There was coldness in those blue eyes, which made Kakashi take another moment to think. "That should do it, but I'll have to examine the cut later." "Alright, Kakashi-sensei." Naruto managed a small smile as he looked at the Junin in front of him. He still had some reservations about him, but maybe, just maybe, he could trust this man enough to let him into his life. Naruto took that moment to finish tying the back of his hand off with the bandana, though it was almost unnecessary now, and to examine the aura of his teacher. He didn't even bother trying to identify the colors but instead just tried to identify the feelings that came from each color. Currently, at the top was a lot of curiosity mixed with a little apprehension. But there was a great deal of confidence, and much like the trees, there was the green calm. Kakashi turned back to their attackers, only to find them glaring at him. His response was to start ticking off on fingers. Sunny day, plus no rain for days, equals no puddles. He smiled at them. "Well, we'd love to stay and all, but we have to be going. Someone should be along to pick you up in a little while." He then turned to Tazuna, who was looking more than a little worried. "Now that Naruto has been taken care of, I have some questions for you. Please, I beg you, just take me to my village, I'll explain everything. Just please get me home to my daughter and grandson," Tazuna pleaded with Kakashi. "Wave Country, my home, is failing. This bridge is its last hope. Ever since the crime lord Gatu set up business. He's the one in charge of the shipping between the islands of Wave and the mainland, among other things. The rates he charges are severe, but that is not the only thing. Since he started, he's been moving in drugs and other things, and the mercenaries that he uses to guard them are scaring away all the people who have enough money to get out. All I ask is that you get me to the site. It's true that I lied. Gatu will do anything to see that I die and that the bridge is left unfinished. Please, get me there. Give my people a fighting chance." Naruto examined his aura and noticed he was telling the truth and he was sincere about his feelings. "I don't know about you too," Naruto said as he cleaned off the kunai that he had used against the ninja. Everyone turned to look at him. "But I say we finish the mission. Besides, it might be interesting to fight some ninja from another village." That comment really sparked Sasuke's curiosity, and through him Naruto knew that he had Sakura hooked. Sakura really looked worried about the prospect of facing against other ninja, but she would follow Sasuke to the depths of hell, so eventually she agreed. "That's settled, come on." Kakashi turned and with Tazuna and the three genin they headed down the road and onward to Wave Country. Everyone stayed on higher guard throughout the rest of the journey. Well, they presumed Kakashi was on higher alert. It was hard to tell when he was reading his book and giggling every few minutes. The group managed to get a boat across from the mainland to Wave Country. There was a dense fog around them. It was so dense that they almost didn't see the bridge before it loomed above them out of the fog. The bridge was huge, but only about 3/4 finished. The pilot dropped them off on a short pier close to Tazuna's house. They were about half the way there when all of Naruto's senses went wild. Danger, they screamed at him. He whirled around and grabbed Sakura and Tazuna, pulling them down with him. Everyone down, Kakashi yelled. He was just in time. A massive blade, more akin to a giant cleaver than a sword, spun through the air above them. It lodged in a tree the lake's shore. By the time they recovered, there was a man standing on the long handle of the blade. Watch, but do not interfere, the Kyuubi's voice deep inside Naruto spoke. Look at his aura. That man is both mad and very confident in his abilities. That means that unless the madness has changed into delusion, he is quite powerful if he thinks he can take on your Junin instructor. So watch, and unless I tell you to, do not interfere. So Naruto watched. There was talk for a minute, and as Kakashi prepared for the fight he reached up to reveal his left eye. What Sasuke called the Sharingan, Copy Wheel Eye. I believe that now is a time to activate the second level of the demon eyes. Close your eyes. Focus more chakra through the basic chakra molding seal and then fold it back into your eyes. That should be enough to trigger the second level. Naruto brought his hands together in the seal and focused his chakra as Kyuubi directed. When he opened his eyes, Sakura was screaming as Kakashi was chopped in half by their attacker, who was named Zabuza. What Naruto saw shocked him a little. The Kakashi that was chopped in half had a small blue aura, as did the attacking Zabuza. They aren't real, watch. The great demon didn't lie. The Kakashi dissolved into water that splashed against the ground. Another Kakashi appeared behind the Zabuza and put a kunai to his neck. This Kakashi had a more substantial aura of many colors, glowing brightly under his skin. He is real. The second level of the demon eyes allows you to see a person's strength and the skills that they use. It will also let you see the movements of chakra used outside the body. What you saw was a Mizu Bunshin. Water clone. That was why it had a blue aura, it was a water technique. It's a fake, Kakashi. Naruto shouted, but the real Zabuza was already behind him. Kakashi only had time to duck the swing of the sword, and even that wasn't enough. He was flying through the air from Zabuza's kick and landed in the water. Another instant later, Zabuza had Kakashi trapped in a Suiru no Jutsu, water prison technique. Kakashi yelled at them to get away. Their duty was to protect Tazuna, not fight Zabuza. Zabuza wasn't even waiting for their answers. Using a one-handed seal, he channeled chakra and a Mizu Bunshin formed on the edge of the water closest to the three genin. In an instant the clone was attacking. Naruto only had an instant to release the seal and bring his arms up to block the kick before it connected. Even with all his weights and training, he was thrown backwards by the kick. In the process, his forehead protector flew off. Naruto landed on his back. His instant reaction was to scramble up. He's so strong. Naruto couldn't think. He inadvertently dropped the chakra flow to his eyes and the red of the demon eyes faded to his natural blue. Kid, we don't stand a chance. The clone was standing on his forehead guard, glaring at Naruto, and Naruto was afraid. Kid, we've got to run. Naruto stumbled back, tripped over a rock and fell down. He threw out his hand to break his fall and the bandana caught his eye. He looked away from the clone of the man, finally hearing the voice from inside his head. Get a hold of yourself. Kyuubi barked at him, finally getting his attention. That is his killing intent. It's strong enough to impact your base instincts to run. But a human can overcome his instincts. Or are you an animal? Kyuubi spat the last word. I don't train animals. Now stand up and face him. Naruto stood up, shaking off the killing intent. I don't run. Naruto stood up, feeling contempt for himself for falling for something so simple. And I want that back. He pointed at the forehead protector. Naruto, what are you doing? Sakura asked. Her voice was full of fear of the man with the giant sword. Getting my forehead protector back. A quick series of seals and Naruto swiped a hand over his jacket and another over his pants. Another instant, and he was off. All Sakura could see was a blur of motion right at the clone and the forehead protector. The clone reacted as Zabuza would, with a kick at his chest, but Naruto wasn't there. Naruto slid under the clone, one hand grabbing the forehead protector as the other sliced up the leg of the clone with a kunai. The clone couldn't hold form with damage, so even though the cut wasn't fatal, it was enough to make the clone dissolve. Naruto stood up and tied the forehead protector behind his head. Here is a name for you to remember, Naruto said, straightening the forehead protector with one hand. The person who will become the greatest ninja in the entire world. His hand slipped down and pulled off the sunglasses, revealing his piercing blue eyes. Uzumaki Naruto. Now, let him go. Sakura watched the blonde-haired boy. She was sure that he had snapped when he rushed at the clone. But he had won, and the clone was nothing more than a puddle of water. There was more to it than just battle prowess, though. Naruto was standing there, putting on his forehead protector, and declaring to the man with the long sword that he was going to be the greatest ninja in the world. She had never seen him look this way. So composed and calm, so sure of himself, but greatest of all, how brave he was. A little blush crept into her cheeks as she looked at him. Tazuna watched the boy. He had thought little of the boy when he first saw him. But when they had been first attacked, he had been poisoned and unflinchingly cut his own hand to release the blood and poison. And here he was now, facing down a strong opponent and not even blinking. The boy made him smile, and feel slightly braver by association. Silently, he cheered for the boy. Kakashi knew the boy was stubborn, but this was going a bit far. Obviously Naruto did not know who he was dealing with. He had to admit, though, the boy earned his respect when he didn't abandon him. Naruto, you don't understand. This man is too strong for you. He is called. Kakashi spoke from inside the bubble of water, but was cut off by Zabuza. Ah, so you know about my little nickname, said Zabuza, with what could only be called glee in his voice. He turned to the genin. Sakura and Sasuke were still guarding Tazuna, while Naruto stood on the edge of the lake. All were watching Zabuza. By the time I was your age, my hands had already been bathed in blood. Sakura started to tremble in fear. Sasuke's face hardened, but he didn't move, and Naruto seemed unfazed by the revelation. 14 years ago, I killed every member of that year's graduating class in Hidden Mist, and I've been unstoppable ever since. That is why I am called the Demon Zabuza. Sakura's trembling increased, and even Sasuke seemed a bit shaken by the bloody revelation. Tazuna took a step back, disgusted and frightened by the murderer. Kakashi remained silent, not able to look at the man who had trapped him. Naruto's reaction snapped the others out of their respective imaginations gone wild. He laughed. At first no one was quite sure where the incongruous sound was coming from, but slowly all eyes focused on Naruto. A demon? Naruto laughed even harder. Then, as quickly as it had come, it stopped, and Naruto's voice became deadly serious. You know nothing of demons. Show him, kid. Show him what a mistake he made. Show him a true demon, Kyuubi growled. He started to feed his chakra to the boy. Red energy started to seep out from his body. I'll show you a demon. Naruto spoke softly, but they all heard him. The red demon chakra mingled with his own yellow chakra. The combination looked like an eerie fire burning within him. Everyone could feel the moments passing as his presence became stronger. Only Kakashi noticed, but Zabuza's hand started to shake a little as he watched the blue-eyed boy. Suddenly, Naruto disappeared in a blur of red and yellow. All that remained was a single kunai that flew fast and hard, straight at Zabuza. Zabuza managed to catch the kunai and throw it back into the air just before the exploding note attached to it detonated. But it was too late for him anyway. Naruto appeared in front of him, supported by the force of his power on top of the water. Two chakra wings formed in the air behind him, arching high and back. Kaden. Ryuzahain Hitofuki no Jutsu, Fire type. Dragon Wing Gust Technique. Naruto spoke as the wings came down. Zabuza pulled his arm out of the watery orb that held Kakashi prisoner and tried to escape the attack. He managed to dodge the direct attack, even though it had gone off right in front of him, but he didn't escape completely. His right arm was caught in the blast and burning gashes formed all along it. He cried out in pain. Kakashi had managed to dive under the water as soon as the Suiru no Jutsu, water prison technique, was released, and was saved from the attack. You brat, Zabuza snarled, forming a one-handed seal. 6 Mizu Bunshin, water clones, formed around Naruto, drawing their swords. Die, he yelled as the clones attacked, but Naruto was already forming seals. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Shadow Clone Technique. A dozen Narutos formed into existence on either side of each of the Mizu Bunshin, water clones. Each one burned with the fire that Naruto had, their kunai spinning. Zabuza's clones didn't stand a chance. In an instant they returned to water, but in that moment, Zazuba managed to escape. Naruto looked around, but couldn't see the man who had dared to call himself a demon. Naruto closed his eyes and let his natural senses go to their unnatural limits. Still, nothing could be found of Zabuza, though there were traces of another presence. Someone had been watching the battle. "Kid, you're at your limit. Power down right now," Kyuubi ordered from Naruto's mind. "You had better come to me. We have things to talk about." "Yes, sensei," Naruto whispered. He felt the red chakra drain away, and the strain on his body started to show. His senses returned to normal and his eyes started to droop. The yellow chakra faded away and he could no longer support himself over the water. Naruto blacked out before he hit. Kakashi swam up from the bottom of the lake and broke through the water's surface. He walked over to Naruto and, after making sure that Zabuza was gone, picked him up and pulled his forehead protector back down over his left eye. He carried Naruto back to land. Sakura was still too shocked to say anything. What had happened? It was all so fast that she couldn't follow it all. What about all that energy? Could that really have come from Naruto? So many questions bombarded her that she didn't know where to start asking them. But the first one that came to her lips when Kakashi stepped onto land was not about what had happened. "Kakashi-sensei, will he be alright?" she asked, stepping forward to look at the boy in his arms. Kakashi looked at her for a long moment before answering. "He'll be alright. He's just exhausted after putting out all that chakra at once." He walked over to them, holding Naruto in his arms as though he were asleep. Sasuke watched Naruto suspiciously. What had happened? Where did all that power come from? And those techniques, chakra wings, and then clones that could fight back? Naruto had never used those techniques before, never even hinted at them, not once. But why hide such strength and such powerful techniques? Now he wanted to know Naruto's secrets as well, and gain the knowledge of power, so that he could kill his brother. "Mr. Tazuna, if it would be alright, I would like for us all to find a place to rest. Is it very much further to your house?" "What?" Tazuna tore his eyes away from Naruto in Kakashi's arms. "No, it's not far, right this way." He walked off flanked by Sakura on one side, Sasuke on the other. When they got to the house, Kakashi was directed to a room by Tsunami, Tazuna's daughter, where he could lay Naruto down to rest. When he returned, everyone was looking at him expectantly, except for Tsunami who was cooking dinner. "Kakashi-sensei," Sakura started hesitantly. "What happened? Was that really Naruto? He seemed so different." She shivered a little at the memory of the power that Naruto had given off and how it has scared her. "I want to know where he got all that power, and those techniques," Sasuke added before looking at Kakashi suspiciously. "Did you teach those to him? I just want to know if he'll be alright," Tazuna said. All eyes turned on Kakashi, waiting for him to answer their questions. "He'll be alright, it's just chakra exhaustion. It happens to the best of us, even me sometimes. He'll wake up when he's recovered, but I honestly don't know when that will be. As for the techniques, no, I didn't teach those to him and I don't know where he learned them. But yes, that was Naruto, through and through. Anything else and you'll have to ask him. Please be careful, he may not want to answer, and you are not to pressure him." It was at this point that Tsunami's wonderful timing came into action and she called them all to dinner. Sakura and Sasuke tried to ask Kakashi more questions but he would not answer them. Instead, he told them to go rest because tomorrow they would be doing more training, with or without Naruto. The next day, when Kakashi came to look in on Naruto at sunrise, all he found was a note saying that Naruto had gone out training on his own and would be back that night or the next day. It worried Kakashi that Naruto would be staying out at night on his own, but after the boys' display the previous day, it didn't worry him too much. Kakashi woke the other two genin and told them to eat and meet him out in the forest. Sakura tried to ask him about Naruto but Kakashi was already gone. They each ate a little and ran out into the forest where Kakashi was waiting for them. "Alright, for training today you will be climbing trees." Sakura had been about to ask him about Naruto but the announcement about what their training would consist of immediately caught her attention. "Kakashi-sensei, how will climbing trees count as training?" "I'm glad you asked, allow me to show you." He closed his eye and put his hand into the basic chakra molding seal. After a moment, he walked towards one of the trees and right up the side of the trunk as though it was level ground. He continued up the tree and along a branch until he was standing upside down above their heads. "This training will help you master your chakra control, it will help you learn to gather chakra as you move, and it will increase your chakra reserves. All are important if you are to grow as a ninja. Kakashi unstuck himself from the branch. As he fell, he flipped over so he landed on his feet. Use your kunai to mark how high you get each time, and aim to get higher. I will be back tonight to get you for dinner, and with that he disappeared in a puff of smoke. Damn it! Sakura had been reaching for a kunai when she realized that she had forgotten to ask Kakashi about Naruto. Sasuke already had a kunai in hand when Sakura spoke, and gave her a quizzical look. She sighed and looked over at Sasuke, her crush, and saw him looking at her and blushed. Do you think Naruto will be alright? That idiot, Sasuke snorted. He'll be up in a day or two and jumping around like usual. He didn't care at all about Naruto. His only interest was to ask him about the power, and see if he could learn how to get that strong himself. For now we should train, let Kakashi worry about Naruto, and he started to gather chakra into his feet. I guess you're right, she sighed. And so they went for them, training away, running up and down the trees until they could hardly move. Naruto had left the house very early in the morning, about an hour before sunrise. Kyuubi had told him that they would be going to see an old friend of his. Naruto was a little hesitant about going to see an old friend of a demon like Kyuubi, but he went along with it, listening to the directions that Kyuubi gave him on how to get there. It would require him to use his demon form, and Kyuubi told him it would be a good time to learn to control the other demon senses. Following Kyuubi's directions, Naruto headed east until he got to the edge of the island. Luckily, there was a thick mangrove forest where he could hide the stuff that he would not be taking with him. He took off his jacket and shirt, leaving on his fox pendant. He removed his shoes and socks, then his pants, but left his boxers on. He wrapped his other clothing in his jacket and set the bundle in the roots of a tree where no one would find it, and set his shoes on top. All Naruto kept with him were his boxers, equipment pouch, fox pendant, and his forehead protector, which he tied around his left arm. When he was all done, he moved to where the roots of the mangroves met the ocean and started the transformation. It itched at first, as fur started to prickle up through his skin. The itchiness gave way to pain when his ears started to change. It began was a dull ache but turned into a sharp pain as the ears moved upward to the top of his head. His face changed as well, making him clutch at it with hands that were turning into paws, but stopped halfway there. A tickle started at the back of his head and moved down his neck. It picked up speed and intensity as it moved down his back. When it reached the end of his spine there was a sharp jab and a tail burst through. There was a moment of uncertainty between the form of a fox and that of a human before the two settled for half and half, and the aches and pains stopped. So, Naruto spun around to face the source of the voice, to find Kakashi leaning against a tree some 40 feet away. Are you still Naruto, or are you Kyuubi? There was no hostility evident in his voice, but from Naruto could see with the demon eyes. Kakashi was nervous and had a fair amount of chakra built up if he needed to fight. I'm still Naruto, but Kyuubi has been teaching me. I don't want to fight you, Kakashi. Naruto held up his hands to show he wasn't armed and realized that he had grown sharp claws that could indeed be used as weapons. He quickly lowered his hands. Can I trust you? Kyuubi is, or was, a very dangerous demon. You of all people should know this. Kakashi remained next to the tree and watched Naruto with his normal eye, leaving the forehead protector down over his other eye. Naruto tried to think, tried to find some way to reassure Kakashi that he could be trusted, that he would be back. He found himself looking down at his left arm, where the forehead protector was tied. Kakashi, I am a ninja of Leaf. I wear the symbol. I swear to you, so long as I wear the forehead protector of Leaf, I will never betray my fellow ninja. He looked directly at Kakashi as he spoke. Every word enunciated so it could not be mistaken. They locked eyes for a moment, before Kakashi pushed himself off the tree and turned around. Try to get back tonight. Tsunami's cooking her famous dumplings, and I'm sure you don't want to miss them, he called over his shoulder, smiling at the kitsune. Thank you, Kakashi. Naruto bowed before performing a back flip and dove into the water. Good luck, Naruto. Naruto swam out, headed due west, only his head and the tip of his tail visible above the surface. He swam for many hours, altering his course at times as Kyuubi directed him. After several hours, a heavy mist rose and surrounded him, but he didn't stop swimming. Even when his muscles ached and waves washed over his head, he didn't stop. Here we come, sister, Kyuubi spoke from the depths of Naruto's mind. That's all for now. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments.